welcome to my utterly unhinged recap of Onyx Storm. Many of you probably thought that this day would never come because, to be honest, Iron Flame took the soul out of me a little bit, much like Sadie Ryerson, honestly. But lucky for you lot, I am nothing if not a completionist, so here we are with my utterly unhinged recap of Onyx Storm. As always, before we begin, I've got a bit of housekeeping to do. Whilst I do try very, very hard to get all of these plot points correct, I am just a girl. So if something is wrong, if I made an oopsie, please do just politely correct me in the comments, or rudely correct me. You never know, I might be into it. Whilst this is primarily a recap, I will give my thoughts, feelings, and theories throughout with a big kind of review section at the end. So if that's not your cup of tea and you just want pure plot, well, I've lost it. So this might not be the video for you, babe. Actively encourage you to share your thoughts and feelings throughout. Do leave them in the comments down below. And don't forget to put some super cool, fun keywords in there so the algorithm knows that this is a trendy, relevant video. If you do like these videos, please do all of that because it really does help these videos do well, and when they do well, I get to make more of them. So that's a win-win. And speaking of winning, this part of today's video is sponsored by Lilo. Yeah, I got you. Don't worry, babe. Listen, Divas, Valentine's Day is coming up. And even if you've got no plans other than a date with your book character boyfriend, girlfriend, or partner, I can promise you, your evening will be a whole lot more fun with today's sponsor, Lilo. That's right. If you love spice, but you were hoping to make it more of a interactive experience, shall we say, let me introduce you to your new bestie, Lilo. Lilo is the luxury toy brand. We're talking top dollar designer goods, babe. Because trust me, your high standards for book boyfriends should follow through to other things in your life, babe. I promise you, keep the bar up here. It's a slippery slope otherwise. And I'm here to help. Using my stackable discount code Ellbat15, you can get 15% off of all Lilo products this Valentine's Day. You can maybe even grab yourself a Lilo Switch, babe. I've talked about the Switch before, okay? And I'm here talking about it again. Because trust me, you need to hear this. We're talking dual usage design, sensorial ribs, 2 vibrating motors. Yeah, you thought one was enough. It also has 16 different intensities and 10 powerful modes. That's more powerful than Sadie Ryerson. You guys know I've always been a huge advocate for giving people the space to explore and enjoy their sexuality, which is why I'm so glad that Lilo has a huge range of products to match whatever your needs may be, diva. So if you would like to try something a little fun, a little luxurious this Valentine's Day, whether that be on your own or with a partner, just click the link in the description down below and use my code Ellbat15 for 15% off your purchase. Okay, now all the housekeeping's done. Much like Violet, I hope you're buckled in because this recap's about to begin. The Empyrean series, book 3. Onyx Storm. This book currently has a 4.2 star rating on Goodreads with over 16 million ratings and over 200,000 reviews. One of which is by me, by the way. So you can go and read that on my shiny new Goodreads account if you fancy. Right off the bat, I will say this is the worst rated book in the series. But at 4.2 stars, I really don't think that's saying much. That is very high. For reference, The Hunger Games is rated 4.35 stars on Goodreads. That means the people have rated The Hunger Games only 0.15 greater than this book. Iron Flame, by the way, rated 4.4 stars on Goodreads. It's rated higher than The Hunger Games. I can't believe that this is rated worse than Iron Flame. That surprises me so much, because 70% of Iron Flame could have been an email, which is exactly why I did a 9-hour recap on it. I will say, this book series has had consistently good book covers. So much so that other romancy and fantasy books are trying to copy it, which is completely missing the point because the reason these book covers work so well is because they completely match the vibe of the series. Whoever designed these, 10 out of 10. Each of the books seems to kind of shift into the next book. Like, they're layering the covers on top of each other like a rune. And layered runes, unfortunately, will be relevant in this book. So, I see what you did there. I wish it was as clearly explained in this book as it is on the progression of the book covers, but maybe clarity in this book is too much to ask for. Who knows? Okay, there are no new additions as of right now to this board, so it is exactly as it was at the end of Iron Flame. Speaking of, where were we at the end of Iron Flame? Good news, you've survived in the 70% death rate college and an attempted coup by who? The Dark Wielders of Death, aka the Venin. Yay, we all say, until we remember that no one in this book series is allowed to be happy. At the end of the last book, Zaddy Ryerson, aka Shadow Wielder Ryerson, aka Leader of a Revolution Ryerson, aka Son of a Rebellion Leader Ryerson, aka Most Powerful Rider in a Century Ryerson, aka King of Tyrandor Ryerson, has added yet another other title to his LinkedIn resume. What is that, you ask? Venin. Yeah. How did that happen, you ask? Right. Well, TLDR version, because last time I did this, it did take 9 hours. Basically, in the middle of the battle for Basgiath, we find out that Endana is a 7th breed of dragon, and her dragon fire is what's needed in order to actually complete putting the wards up. So her and 1 dragon from each of the 6 existing dragon dens basically roast and toast the ward stone at Basgiath, which remember is broken because of Jack bloody Harlow. Dun dun dun. Unfortunately, because nothing is ever easy in this book, the ward stone doesn't have any battery power left. Terrible news. So Violet is ready to imbue the stone with some power, aka her life force. Yeah, because she's one of the only ones who knows how to do it, who's actually free right now. So she goes to do it. She starts burning out on the ward stone to try and put the wards up. Zaddy Ryerson at this point is fighting a dark wielder. It's not going well. He's about to die. Violet can tell that he's about to die, so she's like, I'm gonna go turbo sicko mode, gonna sacrifice myself, which is giving romantic gesture until you remember that her, Zaddy Ryerson, Terranok, and Skiel are all tied in a 4-way suicide pact. Less romantic, but you know, I appreciate the sentiment. Anyway, she's like, I love you, Xaden, and Xaden's like, no! So Xaden, being the knight in shining armor that he is, drains from the earth in order to get enough power to kill the Venin so that Violet doesn't have to burn out and die on the ward stone trying to get the wards up to get the Venin to power down so that she can save Xaden. Got it? Right. Unfortunately, however, he does all of this and it's kind of useless because big General Lilith Soringale comes along. She's like, no daughter of mine will be sacrificing herself for a stone. That's my job. She kicks Violet in the head. She then fully sacrifices herself on the ward stone. She's gone. Mama Lilith is deceased. So yeah, wards are up, vibes are down. Got it? Excellent. Also, side note, do we think Lilith's dragon consented to that? Or do we think that bro was just like, hey girl, I see you're imbuing that with power, but you're turning kind of ashy, so can you let go? Hey Lilith. What? Lilith! Justice for Lilith's dragon, truly. Right, so by the end of the battle, Violet's alive, Terran's alive, Sigale's alive, Xaden's turned Venin, and Dana is a 7th breed of dragon, Big Lilith is dead, but the wards are up and the Venin have skedaddled. So Onyx Storm opens on our girl Violet, shoeless. She's shoeless, she's in sodden socks, she's on the cold ground of Basgiath in the middle of the night. What is she doing, you might ask? Well, she's secretly following a man around. Whose man? Her man. That's right, she's stalking Xaden Ryerson. Listen, shoeless, stalking a man in the middle of the night, freezing cold, it's not a position you would find yourself in at any time in your life, let alone fresh off the death of your mother and fresh off almost being murdered by dark wielders of death. But there we are. You might be asking, why is Violet stalking her man? And the answer to that is because Xaden Ryerson has run off in the middle of the night. He snuck out of their bedchambers. Yeah, you know what, Violet, actually? I'm back on Team Violet. That is weird behaviour. Anyway, Xaden snuck out and he's skulking around in his shadows. Why? Because he has gone to interrogate freshly resurrected, twice-turned traitor devotee of the dark wielders of death, Jack bloody Harlow. Honestly, the horrors may persist, but none of them more than Jack Barlow. There is nothing that could kill this man, I'm convinced. At this point, Violet basically fills us in on everything that we missed in the hours between book 2 and book 3. Basically telling us that no one beyond Bodhi, Garrick, and Violet know about Xaden's little draining from the earth incident. Essentially, Xaden now has a red ring around the edges of his iris, which will eventually fade, but until then, he has to wear a hood or use his shadows to kind of like hide himself so that no one sees that he's turned Venin. Yeah, that's right. He's a Venin undercover. Not under Violet's covers though, which is why she's had to sneak out without any shoes on. Anyway, on the way, Violet is talking to Endana about everything that's happened because Terran and Sigale have blocked their bonds because Sigale is basically heartbroken that Xaden has turned Venin, which is fair enough. And Darna and Violet are having this conversation when Endana's like, you're allowed to grieve your mum. And Violet says, if I wallow in every loss, that's all I'll ever have time for. Which, like, fair, but one must ask, who set that system up? Was it maybe your mum? Violet and Endana have a conversation at this point about how Mira definitely would have killed Xaden by now for turning Big Venin. But Violet is very much of the belief that she can save him somehow, some way, because, quote, he isn't a soulless Venin. He's Xaden. My heart, my soul, my everything. Which, I'm going to be honest, it feels a bit soon to be making soul references, given that Homeboy just corrupted his, but each to their own, I guess. It is worth noting that Xaden and Violet have now known each other for the grand total of 18 months, by the way. Dating for maybe half that time, and they've spent the majority of it arguing. Like, they've had maybe 2 months of stable relationship. I hate to say it, but it's given toxic. Sorry, Sorry. Anyway, Violet finally makes it to Jack's interrogation chamber, where she has just seen Xaden's shadows kind of slip past the guards. Violet at this point, quote, channels Mira's confidence to try and get past the guards, which really doesn't take much the minute they realise that she is a lightning wielder, because they very quickly then say that she can have 10 minutes with Jack as long as the door stays locked between them. 5 for your mother and 5 for you. We know who saved us today. That's right, our girl Violet is a Beanock. Big name on campus. We find out at this point, by the way, Andarna being able to set fire to a venin with her dragonfire was a really big deal, because no one's ever set fire to a venin before using dragonfire, which I don't know if that's news to us or not, but that's a big deal. Andarna then also tells us that magic feels different when she changes color.
I've been thinking about it all night. Magic feels different when I change color. Maybe my use of power in that moment altered the venin, weakened her enough to blister.
To which Violet then goes, that could alter everything. It's definitely worth investigating later.
Girl, what do you mean later?
I feel like that should be like pretty high up on our priorities list right now. Violet, as she's walking down the stairs to Jack's chambers, kind of speculating on why Xaden wants to go and talk to Jack, and Andarna basically says,
he probably seeks information. I cannot blame him for wanting to know what he is.
The longing in her voice startles me on multiple levels. At this point, Violet and Andarna start eavesdropping on Xaden's conversation with Jack, and Violet, she starts freaking out. It's basically Xaden being like, hey, so tripped, stumbled and fell and sucked magic from the earth. How can I undo that? And he's like, you can't give back what is taken. Basically, you're stuck being a big V, not a virgin, a venin. Xaden's like, nah, there must be a way. And Jack's like, no, it only gets worse from here, homeboy. And he calls Xaden brother. Big ick.
You can fight it all you want, but that power streaming through her veins, there's a reason the higher-ups want her. A little brotherly advice. Fall in line and find someone else to that infamous control of yours so much as flickers in her direction.
I would never, Xaden retorts, his voice lethally icy. Jack is talking about me.
Even you don't get a say in which parts of us are taken first, Ryerson. But speaking from personal experience, control goes quickly. Just look at you, freshly fed from the source and already down here, desperate for a cure. You will slip. And afterward? Well, let's just say that silver hair that has you so besotted will be gray like the rest of her. And those weak-ass initiate rings in your eyes won't just last a few days. They'll be permanent.
Never going to happen.
Xaden bites out every word. You could deliver her yourself. The chains rattle. Or you could let me out and we'll do it together. Who knows? They might let her live just to keep you on a leash until you turn Asim and forget all about her.
Fuck you. My hands ball into fists. Jack knows Xaden channeled. He'll tell the first person who questions him, and then Xaden will be arrested. Gods, I could lose Xaden just like that. I can't. I won't. I refuse to lose him. For him to lose himself. Yeah, it's not looking good, but don't worry, because our girl Violence, she swears at this point that she will find a cure by reading lots of books, because of course she is famously literate. And Darna then hits us with,
we'll find a cure. We will exhaust every closer resource first, but if I'm right and I somehow altered that venin inadvertently while changing my scales, then the rest of my kind should know how to master the tactic, how to change him, cure him.
This line here basically sets up the entire quest line. I'm not saying plot line, I'm saying quest line for a reason. You'll find out in a minute for this book. Basically, we find out during this conversation that the entirety of Big Government now know that Andarna is a secret 7th breed of dragon and are probably going to start hunting for her kind. Not hunting to kill, just trying to find them. They're just, it's Where's Wally, but with dragons. Which I'm not gonna lie, I found kind of weird, because at the end of Iron Flame, there's quite a significant bit of time given to Violet figuring out that Andarna is this secret 7th breed, and then her saying that she's not gonna tell anyone, she's gonna keep it a secret in order to keep Andarna safe, because if Big Government find out, all hell's gonna break loose. But I guess we've just immediately retconned that. Chapter 1. So... yeah, sorry if you spent time worrying about the fact that Andarna is the secret 7th breed and that was a big important secret that you needed to keep. Because don't worry, Violet's just told Big Government off page. Like an hour or so after the battle's ended. So either way, Andarna says that if they're going to go and find the rest of her kind,
let us do it on our own terms and for our own purposes. Her tone sharpens. Let us follow every possible path to a cure.
Now at this point, Andarna points out that their path to trying to find a cure for the venin is probably going to lead them to break some laws, and it's going to have to involve Violet keeping secrets again. Which, I'm not going to lie, that's dangerous, okay? Because as we've literally just found out, Violet Violet Blabbermouth Soren Girl over here can't keep secrets for shit. She genuinely is the biggest threat to anyone, ever. Honestly, I can't think of a single secret that this woman has been given that she's kept. Actually, that's a lie. She did keep it a secret about Xaden's secret second signet. She hasn't told anyone else about that yet. But the day is young. To which Violet replies, only the ones that protect Xaden. So you're telling me that Violet, the truth is very important to me, Sorengale, is fine with keeping secrets as long as it protects the people that she loves and cares about. And that's just totally fine and acceptable to her. I wonder when that mindset could have been useful. Right. Anyway, at this point, Violet's CEO of Hypocrite Industries realizes that none of the hunt for the cure or anything, is relevant at all if they can't get Jack Barlow to shut his mouth from spitting bars between bars, if you will, about Xaden turning Big V. So she then tells Andarna, tell Ghislaine I need Imogen. That is Imogen, CFO of I Will Alter Your Memories Industries. Yes, it is. She's going to get Imogen to brain wipe Jack's memories of Xaden being a Venin. Very good. Collab of the century, those two. Sure, that's not going to come up again later. And yeah, that's basically chapter 1. So what did we learn? Well, basically, according to Jack, Big Venin want Violet Sorengale, but they also want Xaden. It's a bit confusing because he does kind of allude to the fact that they're going to kill Violet once they get Violet, but then he also just threatens Xaden that if he hurts Violet, there's going to be like some kind of consequence. I'm getting mixed messages, Jack, I'm going to be honest. He also floats the idea that they might keep Violet alive anyway to use her as a leash to control Xaden once he turns Big Venin, which implies the fact that Venin do still get to keep some kind of personality and are not just like big evil and only evil. We also got told in this chapter that Andarna being able to roast and toast a Venin is new and weird, and they've somehow come up with the idea that maybe Andarna managed to alter something inside of the Venin when she was changing her scales, and that's why her dragonfire worked. I'm gonna be honest, that part of this feels really random, because first off, I'm not entirely convinced that we knew the Venin couldn't be burnt by dragonfire prior to this incident, number one, because I was under the impression that they were still like kind of human. Ish. I don't know. Maybe I'm just stupid. But also, I don't understand why they would immediately jump to Andarna's dragon fire magic changing something inside the Venin. I don't understand how they got there. Why would you not just assume that because she's a secret 7th breed of dragon, she just has super special fire that's different to other dragons' fire and can therefore kill the Venin? Do you know what I mean? It feels very unnatural and random to suddenly be like, oh, I'm the only one who can set fire to Venin? Ah, I must have fundamentally changed the structure of the Venin on a molecular level. Right, yeah. That makes sense. Something I do also want to mention from chapter 1 is that there are like 2 or 3 mentions of gods already in this book in the first chapter. One of which is literally on the very first line. Where in Malik's name is he going? This chapter is literally 5 pages long and we've already gone hard on the god lore. I fear that one of my theories about the gods from my last recap is becoming increasingly likely. At this point, I do need to tell you a story. I know that's what I'm doing anyway, but I need to tell you a story inside a story. This is the story of the Fables of the Baron. This is a story from Fourth Wing that is mentioned kind of in this book, and it's important. The Fables of the Baron is a book that we are told in Fourth Wing that Violet's dad gave to her, and it's essentially the creation myth of the Venin. We're told that it's a story about 3 brothers who fought for control of magic when there was like an ancient kingdom that spanned from ocean to ocean. One of the brothers bonded a dragon, one of the brothers bonded a griffin, and the other brother grew jealous, and he directly drew from the source of magic. Yes, he did. He turned Big V, losing his soul and starting a war with his other 2 brothers. When Violet talks about this book in Fourth Wing, she specifically says, Dad gave this one to me. I murmur, pressing the book against my chest. Maybe it's childish, just a collection of stories that warn us against the lure of magic, and even demonize dragons, but it's all I have left. Demonizing dragons, you say? The book is essentially a cautionary tale against the thirst for power, but it specifically talks about the dangers of wielding power from the ground instead of the skies. Wielding power from the ground. I wonder who draws magic from the ground. Could be that maybe it's not just the Venin who does that. Could it be maybe that the dragons do that also? This is furthered in Onyx Storm when one of the excerpts before a chapter starts says, "It was the third brother who commanded the sky to surrender its greatest power, who finally vanquished his jealous sibling at a great and terrible price." Now, I would like you to remember the specifics of this sentence, because then you can compare it to the amount of times in this book and in the book prior where someone has said that Violet is not a lightning wielder, but that she commands power of the sky. Oh yeah, I wonder if that's a coincidence. Anyway, after this point, we skip 2 weeks into the future. Little time jump. Basically, Vi and Taryn are out hunting the remaining venin from within the borders, and we're told that they've basically been doing this every single day. So far, they have killed 31. Very nice. 17 of which were done by Zaddy Ryerson. Yeah. He's still got it, ladies. But what hasn't he got? A soul. Very sad. Oh, and he no longer has red eyes. Those are faded. So to everyone else, he looks perfectly normal and hot. That's very important. Don't forget that. At this point, we learn that Poromiel's royals and Navarre's royals, remember Poromiel are the flyers' royalty and Navarre's royals are the riders' royalty. Try saying that 3 times. They're basically trying to come to an alliance, but Poromiel have said that they'll walk if terms aren't agreed by the 7th day of negotiations. And today is day 4. So things are going well. There's also a mention here that there's been crazy storms hitting Basgiath, which has been making hunting down the venin and the wyvern harder. And this is obviously because famously Big Lilith died and she was a storm wielder. So she basically had spent most of her life, it sounds like, just keeping the storms away from Basgiath. Violet obviously is feeling very sad about this. She's like, wow, I see my mother in every lightning cloud. It's tragic. At this point, we do get a little bit of Violet and Darna. Taryn banter, and Darna is very much in her adolescent, but I'm growing up era, so she's a little bit less sassy this book, but she does still have her moments, which can sometimes come across as inconsistent character voice, because she goes from being really bitchy to being quite profound at times. But to be honest, I was a teenager once too, and nothing says being a teenager like being overtly profound and then immediately being a bitch right after, so I'll give her a pass. Anyway, the main gist of this is that Indana is really sad that she didn't get to go on the freezing cold patrol. I will be honest that this particular instance of banter feels very much like Miss Becky read about how much people loved the whole "can you carry a luminary whilst insulted" line from Iron Flame, and then just decided to copy and paste it in pretty much the exact same format here.
It's just a quick patrol.
And Darna whines, jarring me from my thoughts.
I need to practice. Who knows what weather we'll encounter on the search for my kind.
Then practice evenly dispersing enough magic to keep all your extremities warm during flight, because your wings won't hold the weight of this ice. Taryn growls into the falling snow.
Your wings won't hold the weight of this ice.
And Darna blatantly mocks him.
And yet yours miraculously carries the burden of your ego.
Riddick and his dragon, Atrum, come swooping down on top of Terninog, almost colliding with them. Because famously, they've got very little visibility because Big Lilith's dead and there's a storm raging. Luckily, Terninog has learnt some insane evasive maneuvers from Miss Becky's helicopter pilot husband, and he banks left hard. Fortunately, Silver One's okay. Unfortunately, Terninog is pissed that Atrum always turned Silver One into a silver pancake, and he does a warning bite next to Atrum's head. Yeah, very angry. So then Atrum pulls like a submissive dragon move. Yeah, we're learning about submissive dragons now. He kind of like puts his neck down and like shows his neck. He's like, hey, here's my neck. Is a sign of subservience, which is actually so funny because in my head, this is the dragon equivalent to like the Victorian flashing an ankle. Violet at this point kind of chastises Terninok for getting so snappy happy at Atrum. This, by the way, will be a reoccurring theme for some reason. Violet asked Taryn if that was necessary, I think like 6 times in this book. 6 times. At a certain point, babe, you've just got to assume it's necessary. Haven't you really? I believe personally that it's always necessary if it's Terninok who's doing it. I know he's probably lying about some stuff, but I'll be damned. Because if that man wasn't a dragon, I mean, maybe even then, who knows? At this point, we do find out that Atrum, Riddick's dragon, is the same age as his rider. That's right, Atrum is not a crusty, musty, dusty, boring boomer dragon. Nay, nay. He's a Gen Z dragon. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He's one of the girls. However, that is not the piece of information I wish to highlight to you at this moment. No, no. The thing that I want to highlight to you is Terran says the reason why Atrium almost crashed into him and Violet is because Atrium closed himself off from his riot because him and Riddick were having a fight. Hilarious, right? Tee hee ha ha, Riddick's beefing with a dragon. But I think it's sneaky. I think it's sneaky, right? Now, throughout this series so far, we have had lots of dragons cutting themselves off from their riders because they're in a grumpy mood, or they're having sex, or, you know, just normal dragon activities, really. But I'm pretty sure that this is one of the first times we've heard in this series about a dragon cutting themselves off from their flying riot. Don't you find it a little bit suspicious that a dragon, mid-mission to try and find and hunt down Venin, has decided to cut themselves off from their flying riot in the middle of a storm whilst they're hunting Venin, just because they're beefing with their rider? Does that not seem suspicious to anyone else? During this flying exercise, Terran and Violet have a little discussion about Xaden. Terran is basically taken to calling him the Dark One. Yeah, it's giving Voldemort. To be honest, a lot of this is kind of giving Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, including the Baron Fable with the brothers. It's very much Deathly Hallows core. And just as a side note, just in case it wasn't clear enough, all the homies hate J.K. Rowling. Anyway, Terran's basically given up on Xaden, is the law here. He doesn't really care. Did you make me repair my own saddle to teach me a lesson, or because you don't trust Xaden with my gear anymore? To which Terran just says, yes. Man, a few words is Terran, but my god, the ones he uses. Aren't they great? At this point, Terran literally says that he thinks Xaden is beyond redemption, which is hilarious. Basically, Violet is like, okay, well, I know you don't like him anymore, but I need to know if I can count on you because, listen, I'm hunting for this cure for him with or without you, but it would be a lot easier with you, babe, because I've only got little legs and you can fly. To which Terran is like, listen, babe, I am actually flying without heating my wings so that the ice makes my wings heavier so that I can prep myself for carrying Endarna, heavier weights, over longer distances. And I'm doing that not for the love of the game. No, it's not game season. He's on board with the whole looking for the cure thing. Back on the ground, we are reunited with Rhiannon, Riddick, all of whom say the coast is clear and they didn't see any Venin. Woohoo! We find out that Riddick and Atrium were arguing because Atrium wants to return to Arisha and not be stuck in Navarre, which, you know, fair enough, babe, can't blame you. Violet basically tells us at this point that that's common sentiment amongst most of the rebels that originally left Navarre for Arisha, because the unity between Navarian and Orishan riders crumbled within hours of the battle's end. But Violet basically argues that the only path for an alliance that can save Paramish civilians requires us to be here, at least for now. But she does add in her internal monologue that Xaden is insisting that they remain within Navarre, and Terran is like, yeah, he remains because Navarre's wards protect you from him. Which is so true, because Venin cannot channel inside the wards. The gang walk back to Beskar. They see that Malik's flame is burning bright on top of the building, and that's because they're burning all the dead people's belongings, R.I.P. But not Violet, because she has kept her mother's journals. Yes, she has. Naughty, naughty. You know, I'm starting to think people don't really burn people's belongings to Malik at all, because every time someone dies, someone keeps something of them. Is anyone actually religious? Are we ever following any of the societal religious norms that we claim are very important to us? Anyway, Violet goes, maybe the god of death will curse me for keeping my mother's personal journals, but it's not like I wouldn't have a few choice words for him should we meet anyway. The gods are going to be real, aren't they? They're going to be real. How many times can we shout out Malik and personify him like he is a real diva before he becomes a real diva? At this point, the gang give a report to Aura Beanhaven. Yeah, that is her real name. And the new wing leader for the fourth wing, Ewan Faber. Now, the reason that the fourth wing has a new wing leader is because Dane Atos famously turned rebel and ditched Navarre for Arisha. So the riders that remained in Navarre elected new wing leaders. Ewan is unfortunately one of those. Both Ewan and Aura are not chuffed that our Orishan rebels returned from their venin hunting alive, which is crazy because at this point, do you not have bigger things to worry about, babe? There are dark wielders potentially within the wards. I would have thought they'd take any rider they can get, but apparently not. At this point, Riddick says, that prick was barely a squad leader in Claw when we left. And Rhiannon, who is the, remember, squad leader of their little group, and basically the only one acting with any form of professionalism in this establishment at this moment in time, asks if there's any news from the front. Obviously where the big venin are, to which Aura says, nothing I'd be willing to share with a bunch of deserters. Girl! God, me when I go to the holding a grudge competition, but my opponent is a rider from Bascarth War College. Like, let it go.
Navarian riders, Orician riders, we can't function like this. If they won't accept us, the Flyers don't stand a chance, Quinn says.
Yikes. Thankfully, though, we find out that Mira Sorringale is working on a plan to fix that issue, but that leadership don't know that and potentially won't allow the use of whatever it is that Mira learns, even if it saves the negotiations, because they are, quote, pompous assholes. Devera and Cowrie will be back any day. They'll sort out command structure as soon as the Royals ink a treaty that hopefully pardons us for leaving in the first place, Rhys says. At this point, Imogen appears, CFO of I Will Alter Your Memory Industries. Turns out she missed patrol because she was, quote, reassigned. She asks for a word with Violet, and basically we find out that her reassignment was actually just her on Xaden duty, as they're calling it. Yeah, that's right. Our boy has babysitters now. Yeah. Rhiannon basically interrupts at this point and she asks if Mira is back today, and Violet says no, tomorrow. This is the second mention of Big Sister Mira Sorringale being on a secret mission in the hopes of exploring all possible paths. But again, we do not get told what this secret mission is. At this point, Imogen gets pissed off because Violet Blabbermouth Sorringale has told the entirety of the second years in her squad what Sister Mira's secret mission is, which, again, supposed to be a secret mission, but the only person who doesn't know what this mission is at the moment is me, the reader. I'm feeling left out. Violet basically defends this decision, saying she only told the riders because, quote, if we get caught, it's treason. But if the Flyers do, it's war. Imogen finishes. At this point, we are told that Imogen, Garrick, and Bodhi are the only other people who know that Xaden is a big V. So basically, one might say that Violet is keeping secrets from her friends to protect the people she loves. All right. At this point, Imogen tells Violet, CEO of Hypocrite Industries, that her and the boys have had a chat and they think she should rethink her sleeping arrangements. To which Violet says, I've decided you can all go fuck yourselves. You tell them, Violet. They have a little back and forth and basically we learn that Xaden is being kept in the dark purposely about all of Violet's plans, Ari finding the 7th secret breed and also Mira's side quest. I don't know what's going on there, because he's worried he'll leak all of their plans to Big Venin if he trips, falls, and becomes full Dark Wielder by accident, which, you know, could happen to anyone. At this point, Imogen and Violet have a bit of a conversation about how Violet is basically the leader of the rebellion now. And Violet is like, no, not me. I just love books. I could never lead anyone. I hate politics. And she basically says that she's just the person looking for the person who will be the leader, because leading is so not her. I have mixed feelings about this line, because either it's going to be she tries to pick someone to be a leader and something goes wrong and then she has to become the leader in their place. Or second option, which is my preferred option, Yara subverts expectations and instead of making Violet the leader, makes her the brains behind the operation while someone else, you know, does the leading part, which I think would be more fun personally. Now at this point, all the gang go and see Sawyer in the infirmary. That's right, they're kind of all crowded around his bed. It's quite cute. They're also joined by Catriona and Marin, her BFF, famous flyers, as you'll recall from Iron Flame. Everyone's trying to cheer him up, and Riddick mentions that he wants to go on the super secret side quest to go and find the 7th breed, which apparently everyone now knows about. Again, I thought this was a secret, but there we are. Oh my god, a dragon! Hello? Okay, anyway, so the guy is just supervising now, don't worry about it. Unfortunately though, Sawyer says that he can't really go because he's legless, and that someone called Colonel Chandler came to see him. Who is Colonel Chandler? Well, allegedly, he is the commander of the retired riders, which I can't imagine there being multiple riders that have made it to retirement age, to be quite honest with you, but fair enough. Basically, Sawyer says that because he lost a leg, he's probably got to retire, and Riddick is like, second years don't retire. Die, yes. Retire, no. And I'm going to be honest, Eva, I'm not sure you're reading the room right now, Riddick. Homeboy just lost his leg. If he wants to retire, dare I say, let him retire. In Riddick's defense, it is kind of set up that maybe Sawyer doesn't really want to retire, but he feels he has to because he's kind of
quote, weak now because he doesn't have a leg. He also kind of hints at the idea that maybe his dragon isn't talking to him because of the whole legless incident, which is kind of like salt in the wound, really. Can you imagine losing your leg and your big dragon's like, nah, I only liked you and your 2 legs. Now, as much as I was enjoying this conversation, it starts to get a bit kind of cozy, homey, feel-good vibes here with everyone supporting Sawyer. So naturally, someone starts screaming. A shrill scream echoes throughout the infirmary in a knee-wavering pitch that's reserved for something far worse than pain. Terror. The silence that follows chills me to the bone. Apprehension lifting the hair on the back of my neck as I unsheath 2 of my daggers and turn to face the threat. Riddick slides off Sawyer's bed, and the others move behind me as I step outside the bay and pivot towards the open infirmary doors. She's dead! A cadet in infirmary blue stumbles in and falls to his hands and knees. They're all dead! There's no mistaking the grey handprint marking the side of his neck. Venin. My heart seizes. We haven't found them out on patrol because they're already inside. That's right, the Venin, much like Bo Burnham in 2020, they're inside. At this point, Ree goes into full leadership mode and orders Marin to stay behind to protect Sawyer and orders Kat to help anyone she can, whilst her, Violet, and Riddick go and hunt the Venin. They start sweeping the infirmary, and I'm gonna be honest, Divas, it's not looking good. Yeah, everyone's been drained. There are literally no survivors. It's just actually crazy. They managed to drain the entire infirmary pretty much. And no one heard shit. Violet tries to warn Xaden mentally at this point, but he's had his shields up since he turned Big V, so she can't get in contact with him. Don't you just hate it when the Dark Wielders of Death have come to kill you all and your boyfriend won't answer your telepathic phone call? But our girl boss at this point is not stressing. Why? Because I'm perfectly capable of fighting on my own, and I have Riddick and Ree with me. That's right. She's not scared of the Dark Wielders of Death because she's got the power of feminism on her side. At this point, we get a very much girl boss action sequence where Ree, Riddick, and Violet are powering through the infirmary trying to find where the Venin are. They come across 2 scribes. We move as one, quiet and quick as we make our way down the hall. I keep my eyes forward as Ree and Riddick check left and right respectively, and their silence tells me all I need to know. There are no survivors. We follow the curve of the tunnel, passing the last cot, and the scribe flies out of the stairwell ahead, his robes billowing behind him as he runs towards us at full speed. I flip the dagger in my hand and pinch it by the tip, my heart starting to beat double time. Which way did they go? Ree asked the cadet. The scribe's hood falls back, revealing red-rimmed eyes with spider-webbed veins at his temples. Nope. Definitely not a cadet. He reaches beneath his robes, but I've already flicked my wrist by the time he grabs the pommel of a sword. My dagger lodges in the left side of his chest, and his eyes bulge in shock as he falls gracelessly to the tunnel floor. His body shrivels in the span of a heartbeat. Damn, I forget how good you are at that. Ree whispers, scanning her surroundings as we move. How did you know? Riddick asks in the same hushed tone, quickly kicking the husk of a body over and retrieving my blade. A scribe would have run toward the archives. Yeah, that's right. The Venin addressed to scribes. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I've got some questions about that. It has been 2 weeks. 2 weeks. You're telling me not one diva on this board thought to check the hooded little weirdos skulking about campus for red-rimmed eyes. Anyway, they find 2 more scribes at this point who are not Venin, and they tell them to run to the archives before hearing another one screaming downstairs. At this point, Violet thanks some random dude called Erin Norris for building Basgiath with stone stairs, which is of course a new plot point being dropped, that Violet will be majoring in architecture next academic year at Basgiath War College. Yes. Good for you, babe. Anyway, they get downstairs. They find 4 Venin trying to break out resident criminal Jack Harlow. They've already successfully murdered one of his guards, and they are on their way to murdering the second. As our girl bosses arrive, Violet throws a dagger at one of the Venin who is currently detaching the remaining guard's head from his body. Yes. The Venin instantly dies. That's right, our girl is in fact killing it. Unfortunately, not fast enough though, because the guard is also dead. One of the Venin then tries to hit Violet on the head with a mace, but because she is of course very small, she manages to dodge it. But not before one of the other Venin screams, "Not the silver one!" Which could mean nothing. Or it could mean, as Violet assumes at this point, that the Venin now don't want to hurt her because she is a leash for Xaden Ryzen. But you know what they say about assumptions, Violet? It makes an ass out of you and me. She is allegedly smart, by the way. She never revisits this thought.
She just makes a conclusion based off a throwaway comment that Jack made and then never questions that thought again, which I'm not going to lie is very on brand for Violet at this point, because by 3 books in you should understand that Violet knows absolutely everything, including who designed the stairwell in Basquiat, unless it's for something that would actually be useful for the progression of the plot, and then she knows nothing. However, at this point, Violet sees, hovering in the shadows of this chamber, another Venin. But this Venin is not like other Venin. Why, you ask? Well, this Venin has silver hair. Gasps all round, what do you mean? That's right, Violet Sovereign-Gale is not the only person on the continent with access to Schwarzkopf's live urban metallic silver hair dye. And as soon as Violet notices this Venin smiles and then gets the hell out of there. Poof, vanishes into thin air. I don't think we knew that Venin could do that. We don't have time to dwell on the silver Houdini Venin because of course there is still other Venin in the chamber that are yet to be deceased. So Violet and Co are now working together to do a little stabby action. Unfortunately, because Violet will never know peace, one of these Venin gets her by the throat, and instead of draining her of her life and soul, which, to be honest, would have been my default if I was a dark wielder of death, but, you know, to each their own.
Ah, the lightning wielder. You're a long way from the sky, and we both know you can't kill me with that knife. He taunts, and the veins along his temple pulse as Rhys sneaks up behind him, her alloy-hilted dagger poised to strike. Shadows quake at the edges of the chamber, and a corner of my mouth rises. I won't have to.
That's right, everyone. Xaden has arrived into book 3, and what an entrance. He uses his shadows to quite literally murk every single Venin in the chamber. Once his shadows has killed all the Venin, Xaden walks into the chamber with Garrick and says, "Tell me something, Violence." A muscle in his square jaw ticks as he stares me down, rippling the tawny brown skin of his stubbled cheek. Why is it always you? Since book 1, this man has had a flair for the dramatics, has he not? He never misses on an entrance. So following failed Venin Jack Harlow jailbreak attempt, the gang then have to fill in the commandant of the Riders Quadrant, Colonel Panchek, and they basically just have to explain that, like, everyone in the infirmary didn't make it. Basquiat has got the worst infirmary recovery rates ever, arguably. And I'll be honest, Colonel Panchek isn't even that phased. He hears all of this and immediately lets them all go. He's just like, yeah, seems like a pretty standard afternoon in Basquiat, I'll be honest. Yeah, I think I killed more than that on initiation day last year. These are rookie numbers. Basically, because of his nonchalant reaction, the group theorized that this wasn't the first time that someone has tried to break Jack Harlow out of prison, but they're not being briefed on it because I guess big government is still keeping secrets because that went so well for them last time. Xaden tells Violet that General Melgren already knows about the fight that happened in the chamber because only him and Garrick were there, and obviously Melgren's foresight signet only stops working if there are more than 3 marked ones together. Famously, 2 is less than 3, so I guess he already knows. We also find out at this point that Mira has put up a ward around Jack's cell so he can't see or hear anything that happens outside of it unless somebody opens the door, which means he has no idea people have been trying to jailbreak him, which is so genius and exactly why she should have been the main character. Mira Sovereign-Gale, I love you. At this point, Riddick and Xaden and Garrick have some like banter about Riddick being like, yeah, I was gonna take the Venin down, you didn't need to do the whole shadow wielder thing. And Xaden and Garrick are like, nah, you didn't have that. And he's like, no, I totally did. And Garrick was like, babe, your blade was on the other side of the room. At this point, the gang then split with Rhee and Sawyer heading back to check on the squad and Violet going to the Great Hall. Everyone seems nervous about Violet going to the Great Hall. Rhee even says, "You're ready. You've got this." And I'm sat here thinking, she's got what, Diva? Sorry? I'm getting whiplash from a car crash that I didn't even know happened. Garrett gives Xaden a look and he goes, "Everything all right?" To which Xaden replies with, "It will be if you give me 5 minutes alone with her." Ruh-roh, the girls are fighting. F***'s sake, you trust her to babysit me at night, don't you? Xaden narrows his eyes on his best friend. "Don't act like I'm the reason you need to be supervised." Garrick fires back. Shadows creep across the step at our feet. "It's fine," I quickly assure Garrick, keeping my hand entwined with Xaden's much larger one. Yes, in case you needed the reminder, Violet is, of course, still very, very tiny and dainty and little and small. Yes, small girl, big boyfriend. Big boyfriend, big hands. And you know what they say about big hands. So Big gloves. Get your mind out the gutter. I'm fine. He's fine. All fine.
Garrett glances between us, then pivots and moves down the steps. I'll be close by, he warns, turning the corner to the right toward the sparring gym. Damn it!
Zayden pulls his hand from mine, then leans back against the wall, his swords clinking against the masonry.
I never realized how much I like alone time until I didn't have any.
I'm sorry.
Don't be. He has every right to worry about leaving me alone with you.
I trust you.
You shouldn't.
I swear to God, did we not spend like 600 pages dealing with the exact opposite problem in the last book? I swear to God, if this book is just, I trust you, don't trust me, for 600 pages. Anyway, Violet tells Zayden that Imogen and the boys think that they should rethink their sleeping arrangements. Zayden is like, maybe you should, babe. And she says, I told Imogen to get which, I'm going to be honest, that felt very off base, okay? Is she a British roadman? Since when did Violet Mind of a Scribe Sorringale start saying get f***ed? Anyway, we briefly find out that the reason why everyone was so nervous for Violet to go to the Great Hall is because she's going to the Scenarium, which, I'm not going to lie, I did misread as Aquarium at first, so as you can imagine, to be honest, I was no more confused than if I'd actually read the right word, because what is that? We're just saying things now. We then found out that Zayden is not DTF, which is down to freak, for the benefit of the YouTube algorithm, because he doesn't want to lose control because he's changed and he's, quote, not whole anymore. Sigale still isn't talking to him, by the way, which is very awkward because he's flying on her every single day to hunt down the Venin. So he's basically just trapped in a perpetually awkward car ride. Violet, of course, is DTF because the one thing that I've learned in this series so far is that no one is more horny than Violet Sorringale. And so she really wants to get freaky with it. And she then tries to prove to him that he's still whole by asking him how much he loves her, to which Zayden says, I could reach the rank of Maven, lead armies of dark wielders against everyone we care for, and watch every vein in my body turn red as I channel all the power in the continent, and I would still love you. What I did doesn't change that. I'm not sure anything can. I don't know if that's quite as romantic as you thought it was in your head. Also, not sure if we knew that Maven was the highest rank in the Dark Wielders power structure. Last I heard, we thought they had sages. So that's a little fun reveal for us. Mavens, they're important. Vi then says,
see, you're still you. Telling me you're capable of horrible things while still loving me is pretty much your idea of foreplay.
Which, you know what? I'll give her that. At least she's self-aware.
That should scare the shit out of you, Violet. It doesn't.
Violet, CEO of He Might Be a Red Flag, but I'm Colorblind Industries, everyone. We then find out the reason Zayden was able to hunt down 17 of the 31 Venin that they killed before is because he can actually now sense Dark Wielders. He didn't even know Violet was in the tunnel until he was halfway down the stairs because his shields were up. But he knew there were Dark Wielders in there because he could sense them. He's basically like a GPS for Dark Wielders. Brilliant. Brilliant.
That's how I know I've changed. Scared yet?
Right, now, do you remember that I told you way back in Fourth Wing and a little bit in Iron Flame, the start of every chapter in these books, there is like a little missive, a little memo, a little excerpt from a book or a letter that's a recovered correspondence or something like that from within the world that we just get as a fun little bonus tidbit. Or at least it was a little fun bonus tidbit in Fourth Wing. In Iron Flame, these tidbits started becoming more important. And now in Onyx Storm, I kid you not, there are points in this book where if you ignored and did not read the little tidbits of content that used to be bonus content at the beginning of the chapters, you would not understand certain plot points, in my opinion. And that really bothered me. It's like putting footnotes for your entire plot at the start of the chapters. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to do that. It is at this point that I want to read you the little bonus note that we get at the start of the chapter 3, because Big Lilith nicely puts like a convenient summary on the chapter that we just read.
Sometimes I worry about Violet. She has your sharp wit, quick mind, and steadfast heart paired with my bullheaded tenacity. When she finally and truly gives that heart, I fear it will overrule the other gifts you've given her, and logic will concede its voice to love. And if her first two liaisons are any indication of what we might expect, gods help her, my love. I'm afraid our daughter has atrocious taste in men.
Recovered unsent correspondence from General Lilith Sorengale. Did Violet have 2 exes before Xaden? I thought she only had 1. Unless Lilith wrote this recently and Xaden is the second. If not, I've got questions for you, Violet Sorengale. I do also want to mention quickly the little additional piece of information we get at the start of chapter 2, because I do think this will be relevant for a theory that I have later. The rarest signets, those that rise once in a generation or century, have manifested concurrently with an equal twice in our records, both critical times in our history, but only once have the 6 most powerful walked the continent simultaneously. As fascinating as the spectacle must have been, I would rather not live to see it happen again. Now, if it were me, I would now be looking to see what those 6 signets were, the most powerful ones. I'd be like keeping an eye out. Do you know what I mean? Does anyone? Nope. But that's neither here nor there. Garrick then comes back because Xaden's 5 minutes are up, and Xaden gets really mad, and he warns BFF Garrick to never dictate the occupants of Violet's bed again, or we're going to have problems. Which is a very confusing way to say, don't tell me I can't sleep in my girlfriend's bed, because now it just sounds like Violet wants to sleep with other people. Xaden's a cuck, and Garrick won't allow it, which is like crazy. So at this point, Violet goes along to the scenarium. What is the scenarium? To be honest, I'm still not entirely sure. Basically, it's a meeting with all the top aristocracy, but if you ask me who they are, I can't tell you, because pretty much all of them, almost every character in this room, is a new character that we haven't met before, who is in charge or leading a nation that we have never heard of before. Or it's a character we've heard of briefly, but not enough for me to remember them, given how many other characters there are. So essentially, there's a guy called Llewellyn, who the book expects you to remember, because apparently he's from Tyrandor. But truly, I have no idea who this man is. And I read Iron Flame 3 times. I think is basically like Xaden's aristocratic right-hand man. He kind of deals with a lot of Xaden's stuff in Tyrandor. Okay, I'm just going to give you a rundown of some of the new characters, just in case they come up again later. You've got the Duke of Chaldea, you've got the Duchess of Elsum, the Duke of Lucerys, and the Duchess of Moraine, as well as Llewellyn, an RSC land navigation professor, Captain Grady. General Melgren is there, and they basically all go, we know what you want. We got debriefed by Melgren and the King. Now, the King is King of Navarre, okay? Very important because there are multiple kings in this book. This is the King of Navarre, which is King Tauri, who is Aric's dad. Remember, King Tauri still doesn't know that Aric, his son, whose legal government, big government name is Cam, is now a rider. He thinks Cam's gone walkabout and he's got security looking for him. King Tauri and General Melgren have debriefed all of the aristocracy on what it is that Violet wants, which honestly is a really convenient way to cut out any explanation about what the is going on. But essentially, they're all there to decide whether or not Violet gets to go on her field trip to find the secret 7th dragon breed. This had a lot of like weird mystery and build-up for it to be like incredibly disappointing, because it's basically settled in 2 pages where Violet says that Indana has a list of demands and will only go if those demands are met. The first of these demands is that Violet gets to pick the squad that goes, and immediately Melgren and the other generals are like, absolutely not, you can get wrecked. You will be going with RSC Professor Captain Grady, and he's picking the team. You're only allowed to go because Indana is your dragon. You have no authority here, so suck it up. At this point, we don't even get to hear the rest of the demands, because they then go, take it or leave it, and Violet goes, fine, but only if the other demands are met. To which they go, maybe, and she leaves. I have no idea what's going on. As she's being walked out of the scenarium, Llewellyn, of aristocratic fame, I guess, hands her a secret note from Viscount Dacarus, yes, people traffic account Orlok from Iron Flame, and that note says, you have 3 days to hold up your end of our bargain. And I'll be honest with you guys, I'm sat here thinking, what bargain? This is what happens when you write your second book to be 70% of the main characters having the same argument. Anything that was actually important and you expect me to remember, I simply cannot, Miss Becky. I was so flabbergasted. So I ended up Googling it, and basically everyone was confused as I was by this point. The only deal that I could actually remember going on between Violet and Viscount Takaris was a deal in Iron Flame whereby, in exchange for the Luminary, Violet agreed to let the Flyers come into the woods at Orisha and be schooled by the Riders. Hence the whole Flyers in Orisha, Wyvern attack on a mountain, really getting shot gate. Remember that? Do we recall? However, there is the implication here that because the wards at Orisha are failing, Violet is now on the hook to get the Flyers safe in Navarre. Like at Basgiath. Like that's on her. But the issue with this is that Yaris is then expecting the reader to connect 3 separate pieces of information in order to understand what this memo means. She's expecting the reader to work out that the wards in Orisha are failing, the wards in Basgiath are now at full power, and this deal now means that Violet has to work out a way for the Flyers to live at Basgiath. And you have to connect them. But like no one has mentioned that deal in a while, and no one's mentioned it now. So you're kind of left thinking, is that really the deal? Or did Violet and Takaris make another deal, but that deal happened off page, and we don't know about it? And that's like the second secret deal, and we're not supposed to know what this missive means, right? Either way, everyone's confused right now. We find out a few pages earlier that Melgren and Navarre's royals are refusing to let the Flyers stay within the wards at the Death Factory, and so negotiations with all the nobles and aristocracy in the Scenarium is to solve this problem before Poromil walk out of negotiations after 7 days. And apparently this is all on Violet Sorrengail to fix now, according to Takaris, but like in secret. So for now, we've got like Catriona and Marin and Traeger and all the other Flyers that we met in Iron Flame. They are still in Basgiath for now, but they're expected to be forced to leave if Poromil walk out of negotiations. Now, if you're sat there thinking, this seems a bit confusing, Ellbat, maybe you're explaining it badly. I'm not. This is genuinely what is written down. So genuinely, I don't think I've read a book in a while that's done such a bad job of orientating the reader. Like, listen, Mira Sorrengail is on a secret mission, and even though every other character, with the exception of Xaden, is fully aware of like what Mira is doing on her secret mission, the reader is left in the dark. And then we get thrown into a scenario where there's a bunch of characters that I may or may not have met before. I don't know. And we're told that Violet has got a bunch of demands, but we don't get to hear any of them for her dragon field trip to find the secret 7th breed that no one seems fazed by the way. And this all goes really terribly, but don't worry, Violet's got a plan to fix it all, but also she has another secret plan to fix the political situation based on a secret deal she made with Takaris, which may or may not be related to the deal she made in Iron Flame. And I just found this to be a really odd writing choice to introduce in the 3rd book of a series where the reader has always had the same access to information as the main character. Why? Why is the only person that doesn't know what's going on me? The only conclusion that we get to any of that is Violet walks outside and she gets asked, how'd it go? And she says, oh, well, the plan went to shit. And then in her internal monologue, she says, which means the one I'm holding in my hand right now can't fail. And if you were hoping for any clarity on any of that, you're shit out of luck because the next chapter opens on Violet and Xaden getting freaky with it. Yeah, because the only type of clarity Violet Sorrengail is interested in is the post-nut kind. But before things can escalate to full-blown coitus, Xaden hits Violet with the, don't. I need space. Rutro, turns out Xaden enjoyed Violet's light show a little bit too much, and he lost control and started sucking power from the earth again. Yeah, right. It could happen to anyone, babe. Thankfully, it's only a little teeny weeny bit of draining that discolors the headrest, like the wood where his hands were. And Xaden says that this is the proof they need that they cannot get freaky with it, even though he really, really wants to, because he cannot control himself. That's right, Xaden Ryerson has just added incel to his resume. At this point, someone interrupts them getting dressed by knocking on the door and kind of shouting. Much to Xaden's annoyance, he's like, are you kidding me? And there's a reply through the door that says, you're in there with my little sister and you're asking me if I'm kidding you? If I had a coin for every time Brother Brennan was shouting through the door at half-dressed Violet and Xaden, I'd have 2 coins, which isn't a lot. But it's weird that it's happened twice. As happens far too frequently in this book series, they open the door to see a small army of people in the hallway outside of their room, including Llewellyn. Shout out Llewellyn, you're not on the board, because to be honest, I don't know who you are. At this point, Violet rightfully asks, why did nobody bother knocking? And Garrick says, because she's mean, and points to Imogen. Which, I'm not not gonna lie, that kind of suggests that they were all just standing out there for a while. I know the door is warded, so they didn't hear anything, but it does kind of imply that they were maybe stood out there long enough to smell the small fire caused by Violet's lightning orgasm. And nobody finds this awkward or weird enough, in my opinion. At this point, my preferred Sorringale, Mira, appears, walking down the hall with a little snippy one-liner, which neatly makes this scene an almost exact replica of the scene where Big Lilith sees freshly resurrected Brother Brennan outside of Violet's room before the Battle of Basgiath. Either this is intentional foreshadowing that Mira is going to become a general and take her mother's seat, or Miss Yaris has just run out of brain power to create new scenarios and is just like plugging characters into old scenes. Figure your shit out, kids. We're in the middle of a war. You made it. Thank you, Amari. We have 48 hours and a shot. Yet another shout out to a god. Yes, these god references are really ramping up. At this point, Big Brother Brennan says that Xaden needs to discuss something important, and him, Llewellyn, and Garrick walk off. But before they do, Bodhi says, anything I should know about? And Brennan replies with, we're good, before like walking off around the corner. Bodhi then gets quite upset and mutters, good to feel needed, which I'm not gonna lie, did make me feel a bit bad for Bodhi. I'm sorry I thought you were a rat in book 2. I'll take it back now. I feel bad for you. You're giving air and the spare. It's quite sad. Now at this point, and I genuinely do not know how to explain this to you, but Mira essentially pulls a disc out of her pack, and in the disc are 3 runes. There is 1 rune for levitation in the middle, and then 2 runes overlapping around it for sound shielding and warmth. Except the line on the very outside, the warmth rune, is interrupted by a small plant stem, and apparently this is the best thing that Violet Sorringale has ever seen. How did you do it? It's almost impossible to keep my tone down. After being nearly blown up and hurled like a projectile, a smile lifts the corners of her mouth. We altered the material the rune is tempered into without destroying it, truly changing its form. It turns out Kylin is an agrarian, Mira says. Battle axe is a plant wielder? I whisper. You don't have to whisper, Vi. Mira grins. The sound shield is still active even though we nullified the warmth rune. It should cover us almost to the edge of the hall. Are you sure? I ask. I'm sure. Mira places a gold coin over the center of the levitation rune, and it floats. Nullifying a rune is mind-blowing. Figuring out how to do it without affecting the others? Incredible. We've got it. It's not without risk, but we can do it. My heart starts to pound. We can save the negotiations. The Flyers will stay, and I can keep my deal with Takaris. If they agree, Imogen says slowly, which you know they won't. Incoming, Bodhi announces, tilting his head towards the hallway. Brennan slowly makes his way towards us, his gaze focused on the floor like he's deep in thought. We're heading out. Don't tell the others yet, Mira rushes, shoving the disc in her pack at her feet. We have to give the scenarium a chance to do the right thing, and the fewer people know, the fewer people who are executed for treason. Bodhi and Imogen both nod, and I blink as they start walking away. Hey, what did you need? Why were you waiting? I ask Imogen. Bodhi crams his hands into his pockets and continues walking, and Imogen glances sideways at Brennan as they pass. Just wanted to make sure you were getting some sleep, she calls back as they turn the corner and disappear. Bodhi, Garrick, Imogen. My stomach tightens. They were checking to make sure Xaden hadn't killed me. Which, I'm not really sure how that works when you're just standing outside the door and it's warded. But sure. Now, can any of you tell me what any of that meant? Who is Battle Axe? Is not being able to nullify a rune a problem that we knew people had prior to this moment? Is the disc important, or is it just an example showing us overlapping runes and nullification? I'm going to be honest, this level of disorientation is not acceptable 3 books in. Yes, creating mystery early on is fun, but you cannot create that mystery by completely uprooting the relationship the reader has had with information 3 books into a series. Previously, the access that the reader had to information was everything that Violet knew. So, like, pretty much there are a couple of exceptions of small things that were very quickly clarified later, but, like, pretty much everything Violet knew, we knew. But now Violet and pretty much everyone else in this book is keeping secrets from the reader. And to me, it just doesn't work. Like, I feel like the kid at the birthday party that no one wanted to invite, but the host's parents made them because it was mean to leave one kid in the class out. That's what I feel like right now. At this point, Brennan comes back and they discuss how badly negotiations are going, mentioning specifically Poromil and another place called Signet? Signism. 10 points to anyone who can pronounce that. Basically, he says that no one is really compromising on anything, even though the threat of the venin is like super imminent. Which, to be honest, I think that's pretty believable. Humans, am I right? Brennan has basically said that the only thing that everyone agrees to so far is that the first year flyers will be allowed to tour the campus with their first year rider squads because none of them are very threatening. And the second thing they've agreed on is who is going on the field trip with Violet. Now at this point, Mira gets really pissed because she didn't even know Violet was going on a field trip to find the secret seventh breed, and she does not want Violet to go. Basically, Mira's arguing that sending Violet out into Wyvern and Venin occupied territory beyond the wards is a suicide mission, and Brennan's like, well, this is bigger than any of us. And Violet says, he couldn't say no. My grip tightens on the conduit. Arisha needs another of Ndarna's kind to fire their wardstone. Mira's face whips to mine, horror widening her eyes before they quickly narrow back on our brother. Is that why you sent me to evaluate the status of the wards? So you know how long you have before using our sister like a gaming chip? That is not what happened. His jaw ticks. I'm trying to support what she wants. It is not happening. We have 6 months, Brennan. That's right. We've got 6 months until the wards in Orisha completely fail, which means the race is on to find the secret seventh breed. Brennan at this point basically says that Mira sounds like their mum, derogatory. Now you sound like mom. The words fly from his mouth, and to his credit, he immediately winces when both Mira and I gasp. Shit. He hangs his head. You dare mention our mother when you won't even wear it? She grabs the runed disc from her pack and throws it at her brother, smacking him square in the chest. He fumbles to catch it. Look at what I've been doing this week, Lieutenant Colonel Isray. Not sure Mom would approve. Crap. This is not the cool, calm plan we discussed presenting to our brother. I don't understand. We found a way to keep the flyers at Baskaya safely, she says. You want... He keeps looking at the disc, and I see the moment the truth hits him. The blood drains from his face, and his mouth slackens. You want to... Yes, and you should find a mirror. Mira interrupts. Sacrificing members of our family for what's considered the greater good is a weapon straight out of Mom's arsenal. She walks away without another word. I pat his shoulder. Take it to the scenarium. They'll never agree. You and I both know it's the only way to forge this alliance. He nods. That's what I'm afraid of. Again, you'll notice here that before Brennan can reveal what Violet and Mira's secret plan is to save the negotiations and keep the flyers at Baskaya, Mira interrupts him so that we are once again left in the dark. Yes, very good. When you conceal information from the reader, you're walking a very fine line because the payoff has to be worth the frustration of not knowing. And at this point already, it's not worth it. I also do want to point out here that I think there's an editing mistake. Basically, when Brennan says, now you sound like mum, and Mira replies with, you dare mention our mother when you won't even wear it. And I think this line was maybe supposed to say, you dare mention our mother's name when you don't even wear it. Because then she immediately mentions his Lieutenant Colonel Isray title, which is obviously his like misnomer that he goes out by because no one knows Brennan's alive prior to this. But like, I'm a bit confused as to why she worded it that way, because when I first read this, I was like, you dare mention our mother when you won't even wear it. I was sat there like, what isn't Brennan wearing? I'm so confused because it doesn't make any sense. Brennan goes to chat to the scenarium about the magic disc that none of us understand, whilst Violet waits in the hall with Riddick and co for the decision. Violet mentions the fact that one of the venin in Jack Harlow's jailbreak attempt had silver hair, and Riddick dismisses it by going, babe, everyone goes grey eventually. That is the least weird thing that happened yesterday. And I'm like, it very clearly wasn't grey though, was it? It was silver, which, if you can believe, turns out to not be the least weird thing that happened yesterday and will in fact become very important later. Now, at this point, a bunch of riders run in, and they're not screaming, which makes a change from usual. No, they're very excited, and they start gossiping. Gossip spreads from table to table so quickly that within, like, a minute, all of the riders are out of the hall. Yeah. At this point, the gang rush out into the courtyard to find that the riders are beefing with the flyers over the flyers not really being cadets. And Dane appears and is like, everyone find your squads and de-escalate now. Because if a flyer gets killed, the alliance is over. To which Riddick is like, yeah, we've actually never been taught de-escalation, babe. I just know stab. And that's about it, actually. Yeah, Second Wing is basically challenging the flyers to a death match using weapons. And Kat, third in line for the Poramish throne, Catriona, she's ready to go. At this point, Aura Beanhaven, Yeah, that is her real name. She pulls a knife to a flyer's throat. And Dane, God bless his soul, he tries to argue that what they're doing is against the Codex, and he hits her in the face. Oh, Dane. I love your redemption arc. You know, I'm rooting for this man now. Aura basically says that because Dane left Basgiath, he's no longer in the chain of command, which means he is no longer the wing leader of Fourth Wing. Oh. At this point, salty little diva and freshly elected wing leader of the Fourth Wing, Ewan Farber, appears, and he calls for the Fourth Wing to protect Aura. Unfortunately for Ewan, most of the Fourth Wing still consists of the Orician riot who left Basgiath. So the Fourth Wing is basically split in two, and the bigger half still kind of is loyal to Dane and the Flyers, right? So that means if little Fourth Wing civil war happens, our team is still winning, right? Excellent. At this point though, First Wing gets involved and they're like, listen, if you little Orician deserters try and attack Aura or the other half of Fourth Wing, we're gonna back Aura. So you better watch out. Aura then demands that Dane fights her, to which Dane refuses because he says he wants to talk. Diplomatic king. But Aurora she's really pushing it, I'm gonna be honest. And because like Riddick said, all they've been taught is how to stab. They can't communicate very well, as we saw in Iron Flame. Zero communication skills there. Aura starts trying to fight Dane, and Dane is like, I am not gonna fight you, babe. So he doesn't raise a weapon or anything. Unfortunately for Dane, Aura is a weapon, and she starts taking her gloves off. That's right, her signet is for fire wielding. Yeah, Dane is about to go 1v1 with a flamethrower. It's not looking good for our boy. Technically, you're not allowed to use signets during a challenge because they're weapons only, but Aura, unfortunately, is a little rat. Violet realises that Aura is about to toast and roast our dearly beloved alleged childhood BFF Dane, Atos, and she's like, absolutely not. Aura starts insulting Dane and the others, calling them a bunch of rebels like it's a slur. At this point, Violet steps up and she accepts the challenge on Dane's behalf because she is willing to stab Aura. The term rebel is so outdated. We prefer the term revolutionary. And then she accepts the challenge. Yeah. It is giving a little bit like, and then everyone clapped energy. You know what I mean? Aura is gagged. She's like, you dare? And Violet's like, I dare. I'm not gonna lie, I'm gonna rate her for this. Toast her. Kill her. Her name's Beanhaven. No disrespect to the Beanhavens out there. Aura Beanhaven annoys Violet so much, this sly dog starts monologuing. You see, Dana's too honorable to wield in a challenge, but you'll find that my sense of morality has learned to waver. I retrieve another dagger and wave it in her direction. You lift your hand against him again, and the next one goes through it. He's the reason you're alive. The reason you're all alive. At this point, Violet brings out her conduit, aka her power controlling Wii remote, and Rhea's like, hey girl, remember, we don't fry our fellow riders. To which Riddick is like, babe, can you shut up? I wanted to blow shit up, which, me too, Riddick, honestly. What follows at this point is Aura Beanhaven voicing the thoughts and feelings of the Navarian riders, and Violet kind of repping the thoughts and feelings of the Orician riders, and they kind of have a back and forth. And I won't lie, the Navarre riders are kind of making a fair point. They basically say that they feel really betrayed by the rebels because they believe that the rebels abandoned Navarre when they needed them most. And they also say that they can't possibly trust the Flyers because they haven't crossed the parapet, but they have, however, spent many years murdering all of their friends. Violet then basically reminds them that the rebels came back to save Navarre and that many of the Flyers came with them to help so that the Navarians didn't die. She also points out that the riders have killed just as many Flyers, but then Aura hits her with a, it's their war. Do you really believe we should weaken our wards, endanger our people just to arm theirs? We can choose both. Either this alliance begins right here with us, with our generation, or we will be the last dragon riders and griffin flyers on the continent. Yeah, Violet turns motivational speaker, and dare I say she's more effective than any of the gurus on YouTube, because this is actually working. At this point, Professors Devera... Where's Professor Devera? Oh, she's not on the board. Oh, I'm sorry, Devera. At this point, Professor Devera and Emeterio and Cowrie show up. Okay, so why Emeterio and Cowrie on here and Devera's not? That's not very feminism of me. Anyway, teachers rock up, finally. God forbid a teacher be present in a school, am I right? What's going on? And in a shocking twist, professors at the Death College advocate against violence. I know. Gagged. Basically, they're like, Sorengale, as always, is absolutely right. Yeah. Unless she's translating a book. Remember that from Iron Rain? I mean, Iron Flame? Sorry, yeah, they say, Sorengale's right. You're all gonna die if you don't learn to work together. Yeah, truly, they said it's death or teamwork. And someone says, die now, die later, what's the difference? To which Emeterio goes, die now and the scribes will call your name in the morning. Which... low-key, that's quite funny. Unfortunately, he didn't leave it at that. He did actually go on to say that if they band together, they have a strong chance of living until graduation, which is great because, you know, my top priority is getting my diploma from Basgiath War College so that I can get a good job. It's a tough economy out there. That's all. Emeterio then links back to the little excerpt we got at the start of chapter 2 by saying that the last time there was a shadow wielder and a lightning wielder alive at the same time was during the Great War, when they managed to send the Venin to the Barrens for hundreds of years. At this point, Violet thinks... Xaden and I are the first of our Signets to live simultaneously since the Great War? Yeah, I'm sure that's not going to be significant at any point later, and we definitely shouldn't research what the other Signets that the first 6 riders had, like, immediately upon learning this information. Why should we not do that, you might ask? Because this series was commissioned for 5 books, babe. So you better believe that we're making this plot stretch. The professors then say that lessons are starting again tomorrow with or without the treaty being signed, and they should all bugger off. The treaty, by the way, is the one that would allow the Flyers to stay in Basgiath in the first place, right? We all following? Great, because at this point, Xaden, Mira, Brennan, and Llewellyn, yeah, another appearance from this man. Still no idea who he is, really. They all appear and ask to talk to Violet and Arik. About what, you may ask? Well, it's about the Cenarium, babe. At this point, they're all going, she should be a politician or a royal. And Xaden nudges Violet's shoulder with his elbow. Yes, because she is, of course, famously very tiny. And he says, at least a duchess, which could mean nothing. Anyway, Violet's like, nah, thanks, I hate politics. Anyway, yeah, second instance of Violet being resistant to the idea of being a leader and or a politician after exalting qualities perfectly embodying the ideal candidate for that position. Right. Anyway, she asks what's going on with the Cenarium, and at this point, a messenger with a note for Xaden comes, so he very conveniently walks off and misses the entirety of the following conversation. Llewellyn's like, your mission was discussed. We get this incredible descriptor of Violet's mental state, right? It goes, the snake of anxiety rises hard and true. Incredible. Arik slides his hands into his pockets at my left. Let me guess. Halden complicated negotiations. I fucking blanch. Your brother certainly didn't help, Llewellyn notes, scratching the bristles along the underside of his jaw. Halden's here? I managed to ask. Rode in this morning with a company from the Western Guard. Arik shoots me a knowing look, which I return with a quick glare. Great. His temper is the last thing we need at the negotiating table. Your mission was discussed at the negotiating table today in hopes they would give us an extension, Brennan says. And given the participants at hand, Holden, Arik guesses, his emerald green eyes narrowing slightly in speculation towards my brother. Holden's going with her, isn't he? My jaw unhinges, then snaps shut at the apology filling Brennan's eyes. I shake my head. You cannot be serious. They're serious, Arik says without looking in my direction. Poromil would accept to Sorengale without question, so if you need a royal capable of speaking for Navarre, they must think you're headed to the Isle Kingdoms, or northward. He tilts his head, studying the older riders. That about cover it. I'm going to be sick. You really are the wisest of them, aren't you? Llewellyn huffs a sardonic laugh. Our kingdom would have benefited from you being the firstborn, your highness. It's Arik, he cracks, folding his arms. Is that why you wanted me here? To see if I'd announce myself, since Halden wants to go gallivanting off on dangerous missions. Make everyone feel good and cozy that there's still a spare. Perhaps. The Duke smiles at Arik. Admirable attempt, but I'm only here for my squad. I'll dismantle the family business before I rejoin it.
Arik quips. Your prince doesn't want to play. Mira arches a brow at Llewellyn. Now tell Violet the rest or I will.
Very important for me to note here that every single one of Arik's guesses about Halden are bang on. Yeah, it's crazy. It's like he can see the future or something. Halden is going on our little adventure quest because they need a royal envoy, basically, in order to speak for the royals of Navarre. And Llewellyn was basically hoping that Arik, aka the missing prince Cam, would reveal himself so that they could just take him instead of Halden, which, fair enough, like, I would do that too. Halden has even got a dragon. He's a bloody loser. But if you ask me, I would say that it's a really convoluted way to get Halden in the picture so that we can tick off a jealousy trope. But there we are. Anyway, at this point, Xaden comes back, having not heard any of the stuff that indicates that Halden, aka Crown Prince of Navarre, and Violet used to have a relationship, by the sounds of it. In terms of what else went down at the scenarium, we find out that Indana's demands basically have been met. She gets to go on her quest for her kind, but Professor Grady is leading the group. He's a loser. And Halden is coming. Boo. But Homegirl does get to hunt in the King's Woods whenever she likes. Slay. And all the riders who left for Orisha will be welcomed back and pardoned by a new accord with Orisha, called the New Accord of Orisha. Amazing. However, the big wish of Indana's demands, which is that there is an alliance formed with the Flyers, has failed. Yeah, turns out the scenarium have just said, nah, we still hate Flyers more than we hate the idea of dying at the hands of the Dark Wielders of Death. So they are now having to ship all of the Flyers who are currently at Baskerth back to Orisha, where they'll hopefully be safe under the wards that are failing for like another 6 months. And in that time, before they fail, they can hopefully get all the nobles back to the table to renegotiate so that the Flyers can come back to Baskerth at a later date. And when Violet's like, this is bullshit, Brennan just says, politics are complicated. Yeah, if you're a loser, and not Violet Sorringale, because Violet literally says, fuck that. And then her internal monologue goes,
Plan B, treason.
Huh? Treason? How did we get to treason? Anyway, at this point, everyone kind of scrambles off and it's just Xaden and Violet. Xaden then says that Llewellyn negotiated something else as a condition of the riders returning to Navarre, something that Xaden didn't even ask for. But the king gave it because he's desperate. This is the king of Navarre. Violet asks Xaden what it was that he was given by the king, but Xaden's like, nah, I'm not going to tell you until you promise me something. And she's like, well, what? And he basically says, I'll tell you only if you agree to, quote, sound the alarm when he loses what makes him him. Because remember, he is famously the Dark Lord now. Yes, he is. Our girl Violet is basically in denial at this point. She's like, no, you won't lose yourself. And then Garrett comes along and he's like, homeboy, we've got to go, like, now. And Xaden ignores him and he's like, Violet, you have to keep it safe from me. And she's like, what is it? I don't know what you're talking about. And he's like, please, Violet, like, promise me you'll sound the alarm. She's like, fine. When you lose what makes you you, I will tell everyone, okay? Are we good now? And he's like, phew. And he sighs in relief, okay? And then she goes, what did the king give you? He gave me back my title and the seat in the scenarium. Holy shit. Not just Orisha either. He gave me Tyrandor. Violet is gagged at this point because Xaden's basically just got everything he's ever wanted and now he doesn't even want it anymore because he's a Venin and he's worried that he's going to destroy the one thing that his father loved more than him, which was the kingdom of Tyrandor. That is actually quite sad. Anyway, at this point, Xaden runs off with Garrick because they've got to go on a summons to fly somewhere. Who knows? But they'll both be back at 8 a.m. the next morning to sign the Accord of Orisha into law. Yay, big win. So Violet then goes, I need to find a cure, and that means saving the Alliance tonight, even if it means I'm a traitor by morning. And if you were wondering, we still have no idea what she's on about. Not a single clue. I've never been blueballed this hard by a book, I don't think. Chapter 7 then opens with a excerpt from Lyra's journal. Remember, Lyra's one of the first 6 riders, basically saying that if she gets court-martialed for helping Braxton defend his people, then so be it. She believes the wards should be for both Navarre and Orisha. It's given parallels past and present coinciding. So I wonder if Lyra is the lightning wielder of the original 6 riders. I wonder if that's the parallel there between Violet
and Lyra.
In either case, one might take this information to be like, maybe we should do more research into the first 6 riders and the dragons and their signets, and maybe that'll lead us to some further explanation of how they defeated the Venin all those many years ago. But unfortunately, no, that's not what they do. That's fine. That's fine. The next chapter opens up on that evening, Violet being with the group and Riddick saying that he wants to be a part of what he is calling Quest Squad, which I'm going to be honest, feels like a really juvenile name for a 21-year-old man to come up with for a secret mission group to try and find the secret 7th dragon breed. But who am I to judge? Please do put your Quest Squad alternative names down below and we can vote on literally anything else. Anyway, whilst he's yapping, him, Violet, Rhiannon and Imogen head down to the Healers Quadrant where they meet Quinn, Bodhi, and also Marin, flyer BFF of third in line for the Poramish throne, Catriona. At this point, Bodhi is like, hey Violet, are you sure you want to do this? And Vi's like, yeah. And then Bodhi's like, does everyone know their assignments? And they're all like, yeah. Everyone except Marin, who honestly has no idea what's going on. Yeah, they basically just grabbed Marin and were like, hey, do you want to come with us? And she was like, sure. That's trustful behavior. Good for you. Anyway, she hangs back with Imogen, really confused, because she has literally no idea what's going on, whilst Vi, Rhee and Riddick go into the Healers Quadrant to meet up with a character called Dyer. Yes, Dyer, big government name, is a new character, and Dyer is a healer that Violet saved from dying the year before, and because of that, he now owes her. But you might ask, why do we need Dyer? And the answer is because Dyer is going to sneak them into the locked Healers Quadrant to get them onto the ward. Why? Because they're there to abduct Sawyer. Right. Yeah, turns out they're abducting Sawyer because he's a metallurgist. Metallurgist? His signet is that he can control metals. And they need him to alter the ward stone the way they did with the rune disc that Mira showed us earlier. That's right, we're finally getting some answers to the things that have been going on for the last 80 pages. Essentially, on the rune disc, they were able to stack runes so that certain runes can still work even if one of the additional runes laid on top are removed. Sick, right? We love that. However, I'm going to be honest, this feels a little bit weird that no one knew this already, apparently. I don't know if this is just new information to our characters or if this is new information, period. Like that it's never been done before, which confuses me because I feel like a lot of people have been doing runes prior to this. And you're telling me nobody worked that out? Nobody even thought to try that? Anyway, Sawyer, famously legless and lost all hope and confidence, he wants them to go and find someone else to do it because he doesn't think he can. But they basically bully him into accepting that he's the only girl boss up to the task, which is actually quite sweet. Honestly, I really quite like the inclusion of Sawyer and his kind of identity crisis and battle of acceptance post-Leggate. It's actually very human and I really enjoy it. It fleshes out his character in a meaningful way. And that, to be honest, was all I was asking for in the earlier books. So slay. We love character development. At this point, we find out that Violet hasn't told Xaden about this plan and will only tell him once it's done. So yeah, Miss the Truth is very important to me. Sorrengail is once again taking up the CEO position at Hypocrite Industries. Rhiannon, Sawyer, Riddick, Violet then head down to the Wardstone where Imogen was sent ahead to take care of the guards that guard the Wardstone, which wouldn't normally be a problem until they round the corner and see Imogen, and Imogen says, I don't think you want me to knock out this particular guard. And who is that guard, you ask? It's Mira bloody Sorrengail. At this point, Mira turns to Violet and she's like, I don't think you should do this, babe. And Violet's like, I kind of have to do this, babe. And then Mira goes, can you be stopped? And Violet goes, no. To which Mira replies, you are aware that they will probably execute us by dragonfire if this goes wrong. And Violet's like, yeah. Yeah, I am. And then Mira's like, sick. Okay, let's go. Bear in mind, the whole time this is going on, Marin is stood there with no idea what's happening. She's like, sorry, did I hear executed by dragonfire? What? What do you mean by that? Anyway, they all walk into the ward chamber and bloody Brennan's there. That's right. It's a Sorrengail reunion, except this time, Lilith's not there. No, because She already died last time. At which point Violet gets a little bit sad because, her mum died, fair enough. And Rhiannon's trying to give her emotional support. Very good squad leader. And at this point, Brennan's like, you've been hanging out too much with Ryerson. Which is literally so not true, Diva. Like, we've barely seen him so far. Anyway, Brennan has come along because Mira told him that Violet was going to go and the wardstone. And he's here to try and fix it if she breaks it. Which... that's actually a pretty good idea. Anyway, at this point, we finally get to know the plan. The plan is they're going to try and alter the rune on top of the wardstone to remove the one that stops lesser magic, so the flyers can safely wield within the wards, which would solve the whole political alliance drama about the flyers not feeling safe here because they can't wield lesser magic. Because remember, the flyers can wield an Orisha, but only because the Orishan wards are busted. And this is why, by the way, they need Marin, because Marin is a flyer, so when they erase the ward, they can use Marin to see if it worked. Right? Are we all following? Excellent. Great news. We also find out at this point that the reason they took Marin is because they can't take Kat, because she is third in line to the Poramish throne, and they will all be executed by Dragonfire if this goes wrong. So they did basically just abduct Marin, kind of a sacrificial lamb if this goes wrong. Poor girl. Okay, anyway, so at this point, Sawyer puts his hands on the ward, everyone's crowded round, and he starts altering the ward so that one of the runes on the top of the wardstone literally disappears, okay? They all then stop and they look at Marin, who tries to use lesser magic, and it doesn't work. Yeah, that's right. They just removed a rune from the top of the wardstone, thinking it would give back lesser magic, and it doesn't. And all we get as a reaction from Violet knowledge is very important to me, sorry, Gale, is, well, that was disappointing. You just wiped out a rune on the wardstone that your mother died to put up, and you don't know what that rune does, or what protection it has just removed from the entirety of Navarre, and your only reaction is, well, that's disappointing. Mira then goes, on to the next. And then as Sawyer starts to remove another rune from the top of the wardstone, it's Riddick, comic relief character Riddick, that finally says, kind of wondering what protection we just took off. Yeah, Riddick, you and me both, babe. If you were wondering if anyone mentions or even thinks about this rune again at any point in this book, the answer is no, which by this point we can naturally assume means this will come up in book 4 or 5 as a crucial plot point. Yeah. Guys, I've had enough. I've absolutely had enough. What do you mean nobody questions this? What do you mean you just removed a protective rune on top of the one thing that is standing between you and certain death, and not one of you thought to write it down? Not one of you thought, maybe I can compare this to some other runes and figure out what it is later. No. And assuming that no one knows what this rune does, say it's lost to time, right? At least draw it down so that at a later point you can try and put it back on, okay? What do you mean? Anyway, they just carry on. And the next rune that they remove almost blows up the wardstone. Luckily, Riddick's there. He freezes the wardstone before it can explode. Very good. And it turns out Marin can now use lesser magic. Woohoo! Mira at this point says that she's about 90% certain that the dark wielder keeping out part of the wardstone is still working. The only thing she needs to check is that the wards keeping Jack in his cell are still working, because that Jack needs to be kept in the box. Yes, he does, dare I say. But she's pretty sure it's fine, which means success. I mean, apart from the fact that they did just erase a rune and nobody knows what it does. But other than that, success! Yes! At this point, Riddick's like, what now? And Mira's like, now we stand trial for treason. To which Violet is like, no we won't. And she turns to Marin and she goes, Marin, I need you to listen to me very carefully. Now, if you were hoping to get to know what Marin needed to listen to, you'd be disappointed because the scene literally ends there. Anyway, we skip to the next morning. Professor De Vera is leading battle brief, but this time with the addition of Professor Keandra, who's a big dog flyer. Not a big dog flyer, sorry, she's a griffin flyer. She's just a big deal amongst the Griffin Flyers, who is also now going to be leading Battle Brief with Professor De Vera, because mysteriously, as of that morning, the Flyers are back at the negotiation table, ready to agree to an alliance. And we find out at this point that the reason the Flyers are back at the table is because Catriona told Viscount Tyrannosaurus about 20 minutes ago that the Flyers can now wield, and the Flyers news travels fast, babes. Everyone is back at the table to negotiate. Yippee, we'll say, until the doors fly open and Colonel Atos runs into the room demanding to see Violet Sorringale. Violet Sorringale! Colonel Atos shouts from the doorway, his face a mottled shade of red as his narrowed eyes search the briefing room. Here, bracing my hands on the edges of my seat to fight a sudden wave of dizziness, I rise to stand as 4 riders follow Atos in. Vi, Rhiannon whispers. No one say a damned thing, I reply under my breath. I'll be fine.
You are hereby charged with high treason under the Kingdom of Navarre.
Maybe not. Things are not looking good for our girl Violet Sorringale. At this point, Dane stands up and he's like, Dad, what's going on? To which Colonel Atos replies, I have no son. Gagged. Violet literally gasps at this point, which, to be honest, me too, babe. And Violet says that she will only talk to the Scenarium, and Atos is like, yeah, well, sick, because they've all gathered already to sign off on your execution by Dragonfire, babe. Also, he's a general now. Yeah. I gotta redo this bloody card because he's not even Colonel Atos. Because Big Lilith went and died. They've given this man bloody general. They're just giving anyone jobs these days. Anyway, we reach the Scenarium, which has that bunch of characters that we don't really know at all. But do you know who else is there? Zaddy Ryerson. Yes, he is. He now has his seat on the Scenarium, remember, because King Tauri gave him his title back as part of the Accord of Orisha. Right. So he's on the mental communication wave, talking to our girl Violet like, hey, so do you want to tell me what's going on, babe? Because they're ready to execute you by Dragonfire as a traitor. And in his hand, he is holding Violet's lightning wielder patch. And they found this patch at the Wardstone. And Xaden points out that because the edges are so neatly cut, he's assuming that she meant for them to find it. Turns out Violet cut off her lightning wielder patch the night before and left it at the Wardstone for Big Government to find. And then assuming that she told Marin to tell Kat to tell Viscount Tyrannosaurus Rex that the Flyers can now use lesser magic. So Violet is her own fall guy, but it doesn't really matter because all the players are back on the table and the Flyers get to stay in Navarre, basically. All very well and good, except Violet is, of course, still going to be executed. So this is where we find out her master plan. She says to Xaden, did you sign the accord this morning? And he goes, I wouldn't be sitting here if I hadn't. Now, upon hearing this news, she's like, perfect. That's all I needed. She then turns to the Scenarium and goes, yes, I did mess with the wards, but the good news is the wards are still up. The Flyers can stay. Everyone's back at the negotiating table. You're welcome. To which everyone in the Scenarium, particularly Colonel Atos, is like, well, we're going to execute you now because you just confessed to high treason, Dumbo. To which Violet points out that yes, she committed the crime, but she committed it last night. As of 8 a.m. this morning, Xaden Ryerson just signed the Accord of Orisha into law, which pardons all the Orishan riders for the crime of high treason. And I'm not joking, this works. Genuinely, they all, within the space of about 4 lines of dialogue, realise that they cannot charge her with any crime at all for potentially endangering the lives of every single person in Navarre because she messed with the Wardstone. Because at 8 a.m. that morning, an accord was signed pardoning the Orishan riders for treason. And she committed that crime last night. God, what do you mean? Everyone kind of goes off. Humph. I guess we have to let her get away with it. Shucks. So you're telling me the Accord of Orisha did not specify which crimes the Orishan riders were being pardoned for? It was just a blanket pardon. The implications of that are diabolical. What do you mean? You could have committed any number of crimes last night, Violet. You had a free pass. You wasted it on the Wardstone. This is the least specific accord that I've ever heard of. What kind of legal document doesn't specify which specific acts you're forgiving people for? You can't just give a blanket pardon with no specifications for the parameters of that pardon. That's not how that works. Oh, I'm not being funny. That conversation where they're like, what can we do? And Zayn's like, yeah, you can't do anything. That is basically the culmination of the consequences that Violet faces for all of her scheming and treasonous acts. All of the build-up that we went through to get here, it ended in 4 lines of dialogue with 0 consequences for the main character. Anyway, just in case you thought it couldn't get any worse, at this point, Queen Maria rocks up. Now, you might not remember who she is, but she is the queen, shocking, who named Viscount Thesaurus her heir because she doesn't have any kids. Slay. She comes in purely for the purpose of informing the reader of the one other piece of information that was withheld from us. She is literally there to tie up a single loose end, okay? She comes in and she says to Violet, hey girl, I heard from Viscount Tyrannosaurus Rex that you risked all of this treason, execution by Dragonflyer, just to keep my flyers safe at Basgire, and all you asked for in return was access to his library. If that sounds like the least organic piece of dialogue you've ever heard, it's because it is. It is purely there to tie up a loose end, and it's so transparently there for that reason. You remember the deal that we found out about by a note that Llewellyn gives Violet that basically says there is a deal between Violet and Takaris that she has like 3 days to make good on, but for some reason we weren't told what that deal was? We now get a walk-on from a random queen to tell us what that deal was in the least authentic way possible for literally no reason. Is genuinely given also talking to the characters, and I just do not get why Violet couldn't have revealed what this deal was earlier. Queen Maria at this point is like, my library is actually way better than Takaris's. I will give you full access to it now as a thank you. And Violet is like, yay, yippee, if I can't find the cure for the venin in this library, Yesenia certainly can. Remember Yesenia, the scribe that we all love? And then Violet leaves. Yeah, that's right. We have endured 80 pages of secrets and withholding knowledge, only for it to be resolved in a 1.5 pages of a dialogue, resulting in absolutely no consequences for our main character, or any of the characters actually, and then to have our final loose end tied up very neatly by a walk-on from a queen that we have never met before, nor seen before, who we never see again. Wish I was joking. Honestly, genuinely speaking, what was the point? The thing that's frustrating here is that the actual plan of changing the runes on the wards in order to allow the flyers to use lesser magic in Basgiath so that the alliance doesn't fail, that's a good plan. Like, that's fun writing. But the way in which everything is written out with information being withheld from the reader in order to give this kind of like forced intrigue and excitement and mystery ends up making it not fun. And I'm genuinely confused as to why they went with this choice of narrative style when the big reveal comes about and the master plan relies on a technicality that no one in Vavar has ever drafted a legal document before, apparently, because they're just pardoning everyone for everything. And Violet then faces 0 consequences for any of it. None. And you can say, like, that's because she's so smart. And yeah, sure. But don't allow that arc, that mystery, to last 80 pages where your reader has no idea what's going on, and ultimately none of it matters anyway because there are no consequences for her. At this point, Violet leaves and all of the second years in her squad are outside. And Riddick says it's because they were worried that they were going to drag her behind the school and turn her to ash, which actually is fair, but I'm going to say he's acting odd. Maybe it's just because he's got more dialogue in this book, but I am really suspicious about Riddick, because to me, he suddenly feels very protective over Violet. Immediately after we find out the big evil venin Jack Harlow is also being very protective about keeping Violet alive. He could be a rat. However, I am saving my rat allegations for someone else later on in this story, so I'm not going to fully put my rat card on Riddick just yet, but the day is young. Anyway, everyone's very happy that Violet didn't get toasted and roasted behind the back of the school. Everyone except General Atos, who at this point comes screaming down the hall that he's going to get Violet. Brennan at this point stands between the two of them and he's like, not today, you big bloody loser. And then Atos suddenly realizes that Brennan is Brennan and he's like, oh my god, wait, you're not dead. And Brennan's like, yeah. In fact, the exact dialogue is Atos being like, you, and Brennan being like, me. Violet then goes on a little tangent about how she's beyond Atos's reach because Navarre needs her and her dragons, and they also need Ryersons, as well as needing both of their signets to win the war. To which Atos is like, yeah, that may be true, babe. You and Zayden might be beyond my reach, but I've just been given command of Basgiath, which means you might be on my reach, but your squad mates are not. And I'm not gonna lie, Violet, he's got you there. And to prove it, General Atos then goes on to send Rhiannon and her entire second year squad, including the Flyers, to the outpost at Samara, which, by the way, is the front lines of where they're fighting the Venin. And like at that point, you do have to question, why is this grown man beefing with a 21-year-old girl this hard? Adult man. And he is ready to condemn the entire fate of the continent to death just to murk this 21-year-old. Hell hath no fury like a middle-aged man beefing with a 21-year-old, I guess. Violet is like, hey, but the front lines at Samara are like a 20-hour flight, maybe more, with griffins. So you basically just want us to fly 20 hours there, be there for 2 days, and then fly 20 hours back. And Atos then goes, surely your signet will keep your squad mates alive. Which kind of gagged. Yeah, it's Violet and her little Wii remote against the world, apparently. Anyways, literally the next line is the gang arriving in Samara after a 22-hour flight. I kid you not, this is side quest 1 of many in this book. This book is genuinely an anthology of side quests. It's not really a plot. It's kind of like lots of mini plots put together to plug plot holes and set foundations for things they want to do in books 4 and 5. You with me? Okay, great. The gang arrive at Samara and they meet this Lieutenant Colonel de Grency, who is very miffed to find out that they gave Atos Basgiath. And he's like, listen, I don't really care what you did to piss this man off, but I've got my own problems. The Venin have basically stopped their attack on Samara as of like 2 days ago. Phew. Very good. So he sends the gang to go and get some sleep. And he's like, but watch out, because the riders here might murk your flyer friends, because they're not big fans of the Flyers. Because if you remember, the Flyers did used to like raid the outposts a lot and murder riders. So they're like not really sure where they're going to get any rest at this point. But Violet is like, hey, I know where we can go. And she takes everyone up to Zayden's private quarters at the base in Samara, because if you remember, in Iron Flame, no one wanted to share a room with him because he was #son of a traitor. And so he got his own room, which he warded to keep everything's safe. So Violet pulls everyone through the wards in Zayden's room, and then they're all having a nice little sleep, catching up on some kip. It's basically a little holiday. At this point, Violet is dreaming, and she's trying to save a portrait of her family from a chest whilst everything around her is burning. Cat is there, and Cat's grabbing her like, babe, we have to go. And Vi's like, no, you have to go, because you're the future queen of Tyrandor. I know that he's gonna choose you. Obviously referring to Zayden, which is very weird. But she's like, you have to go, Cat. And Cat's like, no, I can't leave you. I can't leave you. And she then says that the Venin have taken the hall, so we have to really go. Vi then manages to yank the portrait from inside the chest. Very good. But as they're turning to go, the bed frame collapses and it hits the portrait and it sets fire. And then Cat and her run frantically for their lives. After which point, Violet violently wakes up. She's like, does one of those. She's looking around to check that everyone is accounted for, and her bad dream was just a bad dream. Her and Rhiannon then have a chat about nightmares, and then everyone gets up to like shower and get ready to head out. At this point, they overhear a rider in the hall saying, Maze says they have less than an hour. And Violet is like, wait, Maze, I know that name. It's a good thing you do, Violet, because I certainly don't. Basically, they say that Maze is mated to a dragon called Greem, and they've been mated for decades. And because of that, they can communicate at much longer distances than Terran and Scale. Which, to me, I was like, well, that's a very random aside. I wonder when this is going to come in handy. And you best believe it comes in handy almost immediately. Turns out a nearby village is being attacked, and this village is called Newell. And the riders aren't going to help because it's too small of a village to make up for the risk of casualties, because they've already lost some riders recently because of the assaults on the bigger cities. So they're like, yeah, we're not going to go. The town can just fall. And then we find out that Marin, BFF of Third in Line for the Poramish Throne, Catriona, her family are currently living in Newell. Rutro, the riders say it's unusual for the Venin to attack somewhere so small, which Everyone should be like, that's suspicious, but nobody does. But because Maren's family is there, the squad naturally vote to go beyond the wards to go and try and rescue them. Yeah. No backup, by the way. They're like, you know what? It's a good thing that Colonel Atos sent us on a 2-day trip to Samara. And that just so happens to coincide with this attack on Maren's family. How convenient. Violet and Taryn are the first to arrive on the scene because he flies a lot faster than the other dragons. And when they get there, guess who's there? You'll never guess. It's the silver-haired Venin that was in Jack's cell. You know, the one that Riddick tried gaslighting her into thinking was just old and grey? Yeah, it turns out, definitely not old and grey. This Venin waves at Violet. Yeah, she's your friendly neighbourhood Venin. 180 IQ Violet Sorringale realises at the point that the Venin is like, hey, that this might have been a trap. Who would have seen it coming? So naturally, one sits there and thinks, well, how did they know that Violet and Co had been sent on a 2-day bender in Samara? Maybe he sent Violet and Co to Samara so that the big Venin could stage an attack on Newell to lure them outside of the wards, whereby the Venin would be able to capture Violet. And that would all make sense because it's way too convenient for anything else to be true. That is, of course, until you remember that Colonel Atos was not the only person present in that conversation who was not then sent to Samara. Who was also present in that conversation, you might ask? Orange dragging having, freshly resurrected with a suspicious rune-shaped scar on his hand, Big Brother Brennan. Yeah, this is where I'm using my rat card allegation. I think Big Brother Brennan's a Venin. I do not believe that Colonel Atos is a Venin. I genuinely think it is more likely that this full-grown man is just beefing fully with his son's 21-year-old childhood BFF than it is that he is a Venin. Because, it's way too obvious that Atos is a Venin. He's too Venin-coded. Also, he has a black dragon, and all the black dragons are sound and really hot. You know who aren't cool? The orange dragons. Who has orange dragons, you might ask? Maybe every single other rat in this story. Jack Bloody Barlow. Amber Mavish, who let a bunch of unbonded cadets into Violet's room. Brennan's dragon is orange. And his dragon's name, in English, literally means death. He's literally riding death. And I reckon that's not the only thing he's riding, because I reckon he's secret lovers with Nowlin, and Nowlin is also Big Venin. On the topic of name analysis, by the way, Lieutenant Colonel Isray literally means resurrection, and Brennan means little raven or descendant of the sad one. Rutrow, I guess. Who is the sad one? Who's that? Also, if you rearrange the letters of Isray, we are lost in the source at this point. If you rearrange the letters, it spells out I Sage Air. Guys, I'm going to be honest. I think I've got too lost in the Empyrean series source. Someone needs to pull me out. Pull me out. I guess we're going to find out some more of Violet's family tea at some point. Her grandparents or great-great-great-great-grandparents are just somehow involved with the first 6 riders. I am starting to genuinely think that one of the first 6 riders' dragons was Taryn. That's my tea. Just going to put that in there. Anyway, back to the story because I've gotten distracted. At this point, Violet and Taryn begin fighting the silver-haired Venin. It's not going well. They are getting their asses handed to them, which is unfortunate because then a big storm comes. Huge storm. Where's Lilith when you need her? R.I.P. And out of nowhere, a tornado appears, and this tornado heads straight for Violet and Taryn. Yeah, out of nowhere, wild tornado. Don't you hate it when that happens? Silverhaired Venin, by the way, absolutely unfazed by any of this. It's not looking good. It's not looking good. And right as Violet and Taryn are about to meet their end via tornado, apparently, bloody Garrick appears on his dragon. Unfortunately, Windweedle Garrick is pretty much powerless against a bloody tornado, and Violet and Taryn are being thrown around like they're on the inside of an intense washing machine cycle. She's hitting the Malik, I'm not ready to meet you yet, and panicking because she's thinking, well, we're gonna bloody die. And she might be right, because they then get thrown out of the tornado into a mountain, and Taryn hits his head so hard that the bong goes dark. Violet's panicking. They're sliding down the side of a hill. She can't hear Taryn at all. She's thinking he's dead. And Darna's screaming that she can't feel him. And Violet is like, oh shit, how long have I got when a dragon dies till I die? And she's thinking back to Liam, rest in peace, like, oh, I've got probably a couple of minutes. She starts telepathically telling Andarna, you have to choose to live without us. Please don't die, baby Andarna. That would be terrible. She then starts thinking, is Xaden gonna die? Have I just killed Xaden and Sigale as well? She's still strapped into the saddle and she's putting her head down to Terran's body to try and feel if he's breathing. And eventually there is a breath. It's shallow, but it's there. That's right, he's not dead, he's just knocked out. The bond is back. Also, Violet directly telling Malik that she's not ready to die yet. And then not dying. Which could mean nothing. At this point, Garrick turns up, Sun's dragon, because his dragon was also thrown around in the tornado. And he's freaking out looking for Violet because he's like, well, if Violet dies, say goodbye to my bestie. And when he finds both Terran and Violet alive, he is so relieved. Garrick has to help Violet off of Terran's back because her knee is like severely dislocated and messed up. So he helps put her knee back in. And I'm gonna be honest with you, only getting a dislocated knee after being thrown out of a tornado is pretty impressive. I'm gonna be honest, our dainty and fragile FMC's done pretty well there. Good for you, Violet. Anyway, once Violet's knee's back in the socket, she's like, hey, so Garrick, how are you here? Because you're supposed to be 8 hours flight away with Xaden. Garrick explains that Xaden found out that Violet was crossing the border over the wards, and he completely lost it. Like, fully flipped out. Garrick was a bit scared that maybe his BFF was gonna start sucking power from the earth again. Yeah. And Violet's like, well, how did you even know? And then Garrick then explains that the rider from earlier whose dragon, Maze, was mated to Greem, you know, the dragons who can communicate along distances, the other end of that dragon partnership was stationed with Xaden and Garrick. Right. So that all makes sense until Violet's like, yeah, but the earliest you could have found that out was like 40 minutes ago. So how have you done an 8 hour flight in 40 minutes, Diva? Even for a wind wielder, you would blast your dragon's limbs off if you were flying that fast. And at this point, she strikes the ground at Garrick's feet and you're thinking, well, Violet, that's a bit of an overreaction. And an overreaction exactly right, because it wasn't Violet. It was the Silverhead Venin. Lightning wielding Venin. Yeah, except the Venin aren't supposed to have Signet, so what the bloody hell is going on here? At this point, Violet's internal monologue is like, yeah, this would be a nice time to manifest a second Signet, given that I'm going to have to 1v1 lightning wielding Dark Wielder of Death. And then Donna's like, yeah, as if I have any say in how you choose to use my power. Violet hits that meme of the confused woman doing maths. She's like, wait a minute. Second Signet. Garrick! Yeah, that's right. She's worked out that Garrick has a second Signet. Unfortunately for Garrick, though, we may never find out what it is because lightning-wielding Venin then starts choking this man out Star Wars style. He's up, his feet are kicking in the air. It's not good. Silverhead Venin starts monologuing, as all good villains do, and she tells us that her name is Theophany. And I'll be honest, Violet did a solid there, because somehow she managed to hear that and not laugh. And turns out Violet was right. This whole thing was one big trap, a big setup to lure Violet over the wards. So R.I.P. Marin's parents, you have just been murdered just so that this Silverhead Venin could get a meet and greet with Violet Sorengale. However, as a, quote, gesture of goodwill, Silverhead Venin Theophany did leave Marin's 2 little brothers alive. So that's nice of her, I guess. Theophany's name, by the way, I did a little Google, does mean the physical manifestation or appearance of a god. Which god? Well, I guess we're going to find out later. I'm going to save my thoughts for this character until later on. But when I tell you, it's given mid-management. Believe me. Anyway, in exchange for not murking Garrick, Silverhead Venin Theophany wants Violet to answer a question. Yes, I kid you not, it is genuinely just a Violet Sorengale meet and greet. The question that Theophany wants Violet to answer is which of her dragons bonded her first. This is the way she proposes the question.
The one who gifted you the power of the sky.
Why does she sound? She sounds like the bend and flip woman. What's her name? Jennifer Coolidge. Okay, so Theophany will now be played by Jennifer Coolidge. I hope you're all on board with this.
Which of your dragons did you bond first? The one who gifted you the power of the sky or the Irid?
Sorry, Jennifer Coolidge, did you say Irid? That's right. Baby Andarna gender reveal. She's an Irid! How convenient it was that we got to run into the Silverhaired Venin. Also, side note, notice how Theophany does not call Violet a lightning wielder, but instead she specifically says that Violet was given the power of the sky. And she claims that that power comes from Tern, not Andarna. This, of course, links back to something we learned in Iron Flame, which was when Violet is doing her Signet training in Orisha with Felix. He says that she's not a lightning wielder, she just chooses to wield lightning because that's the form she's most comfortable with, which we can assume is because Big Lilith is a storm wielder. This suggests that Violet's Signet is not at all lightning wielding, and for some reason, nobody seems to investigate this. I'm not gonna lie, guys, if it were me and I was about to fight a war against the Dark Wielders of Death and I may need every single weapon at my disposal, maybe I would start looking into the fact that I could be more than just a lightning wielder. Maybe I'd be looking into the fact that everyone seems to say that I have the power of the sky. The lack of investigation into Violet's Signet and the Signets of the first 6 riders is really starting to piss me off, babe. It is. It's really starting to grind my gears. Anyway, Theophany then says that Xaden and Violet will eventually join the Dark Wielders, and when they do, they need to agree to let Theophany train them and not someone called Berwyn. That's right, the whole point of this meet and greet was her applying to be Violet's tutor. And what we've learnt from this is that there is beef in the Venin community. Theophany says that Violet will come to her because she can give Violet what she wants, which is, of course, as we all know, the thing most important to Violet, knowledge. Yes. Which is hilarious because the amount of things this woman has willfully ignored in this book, I'm just starting to question whether knowledge actually is very important to Violet Sorrengail. Anyway, Big T, that stands for Theophany, calls Garrick a walker and then calls Violet a leash for Xaden, which is genuinely hilarious because I'm getting the most crazy visuals on that. Yeah, this book has taken a turn towards BDSM, which will actually come up later. But what Big T is actually most interested in, turns out, isn't Violet, it's baby Andarna. Yeah, she wants the Irid. And she wants it bad.
You don't know what she is, do you? I forget how short the mortal mind can be.
Yeah, this is the confirmation that Venin are basically immortal. I guess. Newsflash. Immortal Dark Wielders of Death. At this point, Violet's like, thank God we left Andarna far away, because otherwise this would have been bad. Big T then basically says that she doesn't need to take Violet or hurt Violet because, like she said earlier, Violet and Xaden are going to come willingly, because she believes in consent, apparently. Who knows? And when she realises that she can't get her hands on Andarna, she just leaves. Yeah, that was it. Theophany just murdered 2 parents for a quick 5-minute chat with Violet Sorrengail, I guess. That is weird behaviour for a Venin. And Garrick thinks so too, because he's like, what in Malik's name just happened? Venin came, choked me out, dropped some law, and left. I don't know, Garrick. Honestly, I'm just as confused as you. At this point, Tern wakes up and Violet is close to crying with relief. Same. Do not dehydrate on my account. It's good to have you back, Tern. Violet and Garrick then have a very, very short little debrief post-Theophany Gate. And Violet realises at this point that Garrick, he's a distance walker. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He's got a secret second Signet, ladies. What in Amari's name is going on? Violet at this point has Garrick leave because the rest of the squad are arriving. And him being there will absolutely expose his secret second Signet for distance walking. And then Violet literally watches Garrick run up to his dragon, take a step, and they both disappear. I'm starting to think Xaden's shadows aren't even that cool. That's an instant commute. That's practical. Vi then asks Tern if he knew that most of the rebels had secret second signets, and Tern replies, "We do not gossip about our riders." Violet believes him because she thinks that if the dragons did gossip about the riders, Xaden would be dead, because everyone would know he was a Venin. But I'm going to be honest, I do not believe Tern. I think there is a level of gossiping going on here between some of these dragons. I mean, Riddick's dragon's only like 20 years old. You ever hung out with a 20-year-old? Anyway, the gang fly back to Basgiath and they find Brennan and Xaden waiting for them because Andarna has communicated to Brennan's dragon that Violet needs mending because her knee's all messed up, thus immediately disproving the whole dragons don't gossip about their riders thing, by the way. And I guess Violet doesn't feel like calling Tern out for being a big fat bloody liar. Yeah, this is not the first time this man has just straight up lied in this book. This man? This male? This dragon, this is not the first time the dragon has lied, thus proving that even cross-species, all men do is lie. Anyway, Violet can't easily get off the saddle because her knee's all whacked up, to which Xaden uses his shadows to kind of ease her off the dragon, and then he carries her into the commons. And I'm gonna be honest, girls, he is pissed. Yes, he is. Eases her down onto a table so that Brennan can heal her. She tries explaining why they went over the wards and that it was necessary, and Xaden literally just says, "Not now." Uh-oh, I think you're in trouble, Violet. Brennan the Venin fixes Violet's knee, and as he's doing that, guess who shows up? It's only everyone's favourite General Atos. And I kid you not, this man walks into the commons, sees Marin's 2 young, orphaned younger brothers, and immediately tries to send them back over the wards. They'll have to return home immediately. Does this man just hate orphans? Seriously, because at this point in the book, I realise that the one thing that everyone this man hates has in common is that they are literally all orphans. The marked ones that he hates, orphans. He orphaned them himself, actually. Violet, fresh orphan. Marin's brothers, even fresher orphans. And Dane Atos, well, he's just been disowned, so he's basically an orphan too. It's like, out of all the people in this world that you could beef with, you chose orphans. Well, to be fair, if you're a really evil person, orphans are a great target because there's actually quite a lot of them in this book. Like, you're statistically more likely to come across an orphan in Basgiath than anywhere else on the continent. So actually, General Atos has just been handed his dream job. At this point, Xaden makes Marin's younger brothers both citizens of Tyrandor, which means that they are allowed to seek refuge inside the wards Arisha, and Marin will be able to go back and visit them, meaning they'll be safe and won't have to be cast out into Venin-occupied wardless territory. Thus reminding us that even though he's a little bit Venin, he's still a lot a bit nice. Yeah. Naturally, number 1 orphan hater on the continent, General Atos, is not happy about this. And as punishment, he's decided that he's going to make Garrick and Xaden join the Eastern Wing, which means they're not allowed to fraternize with cadets, nor are they allowed inside the quadrant. So not only is this man an orphan hater, he's also a cockblocker. Terrible combination of qualities to have inside of a man. Garrick pipes up at this point and is like, General Atos, you need to sit yourself down. Okay, you little loser. We're going to go to the Eastern Wing tomorrow because General Melgren commanded us to do it. And we are under his chain of command. You have no authority over us. Stop acting like these orders are coming from you, you little dweeb. General Atos doesn't really have much to say about that because he has just been well and thoroughly schooled. So he just goes, listen, I don't give a shit where you are as long as you're not inside my war college. And then he leaves. Once Brennan has mended Violet, Xaden then orders everyone out of the room. Everyone out. Now. And at this point, everyone's thinking, ruh-roh. We're going to have a repeat of Iron Flame and they're just going to argue for the next 20 pages and then lack basic communication skills for the 30 pages following that. But once everyone leaves the room, Xaden only bloody goes and kisses her! We're talking fully face mashing. The girls are going at it. Not the girls. Wrong book. They're going at it. But not completely going at it, even though Violet is keen. When is she not? That's my girl. Xaden kind of pulls away because famously he is now an incel. Turns out he went low-key crazy the second he heard that she went past the wards. I wasn't just angry, Violet. I was terrified. I would have killed anyone and anything to reach you. Yeah, when you were human and you used to say that, kind of hot. Now you're Venin. I'm not going to lie, I'm taking it as a threat, Xaden Ryzen. And unfortunately, Xaden does actually admit that he would have very happily drawn from the earth again if it would have saved Violet. Violet is arguing at this point, like, hey, I went over the woods to save Marin's family because it was the right thing to do, and it was the thing that you would have done as well. And he's like, I know that! His voice rises, and the shadows don't just jump, they flee. Well, that's new. Double what whoa. They then stop kissing properly because Xaden's like, I can't control myself. And Violet's like, hey, that's okay. And he's like, I don't know how to describe what he's like, actually. Essentially, he says, you're too horny for one kiss to just be enough. It's never enough with us. I know you, Violet the Horn Dog, Soren Gale. But the way that Xaden puts it is essentially like, if I pull those Sorry, I just remembered that the internet is forever. If I pull those trousers down right now, girl, I know you'll be ready for me. Well, if I wasn't before, I certainly am now. Listen, as long as you're into it, babe, that's all that matters. Violet basically insists that she can manage without raw dogging if it means that she won't lose Xaden. Not sure I can survive this book without you raw dogging Xaden, but you know what? Good for you, girl. Violet then asks Xaden about Garrett being a distance walker, and Xaden confirms that he is. Violet then points out that Garrett has a secret second signet, Xaden has a secret second signet, and she once saw Liam ice wield, and that was not his official big government signet. But I can't remember what that was. Listen, it's been 2 books since our dearly beloved Liam passed, so you're gonna have to just trust me, the ice wielding wasn't it. How often do second signets accompany these particular relics? My fingers trail down the side of his neck. Often enough to be sure Cowrie can't possibly have accurate records, but not too completely that anyone questions why I only present with one. Our dragons came looking for us. They knew what they were doing. Giving you a better chance of survival? I rest my hand over his heart. If you wax sentimental, more like building their own army. A corner of his mouth rises. More signets equal more power. Well, it would appear that the dragons that they've bonded are all in their familial lines, and the dragons may have lied about their names in order to avoid detection. Yeah, it's the dragon equivalent of using a fake ID. Xaden then asks her what was left out of the report that the squad wrote about their trip over the wards, and she tells him everything, including the fact that she thinks Venin can have signets too. At this point, we get a time skip of about a week. Xaden is long gone. He's on the Eastern Wing with Garrett, but Imogen appears with letters for Violet while she's in the archives, like studying or something. Violet looks at the letter and is like, girl, this is addressed to you from Garrick. And Imogen is like, right, because Garrick writes to me. Yeah, it's given slow burn between the two of them. There's a lot of flirty banter between these two. Will they, won't they energy. Basically, because General Atos is spying on Violet, anything addressed to Violet, particularly from Xaden, is going to be read. So they're using Garrick and Imogen as proxies for their letters. V, we fought in Fervin last night, called by an attack upon civilians. It is with deepest regret that I delay my return in favor of rest. I walked the edge of burnout, but the lives we've saved were worth the cost. And Garrick has informed the healers I'll be in quarters, recovering until further noticed. Llewellyn is standing in as proxy in case the Scenarium orders any emergency meetings. It is worse than we imagined beyond the wards, but I have a solution in mind to prevent future burnouts. Is it just me, or does my pillow smell like you? Yours, X. Yeah, so basically he has worded it carefully, but Xaden's had an oopsie. He's tripped, stumbled, and drained from the earth again. But it does look like he's found a way to stop doing that in the future. Doesn't say what it is, so I guess we're going to find out later. At this point, Imogen asks Violet if she's heard anything from the newly appointed Quest Squad leader, Professor Grady, and she says that he gave her a draft list of people who were going to go on the quest with them, and that list includes Aura Beanhaven, aka the fire wielder that tried to toast and roast Dane Atos before Violet threatened to scorch her 50 pages ago. She also mentions that Professor Grady had his dragon try to interrogate Indarna about the years that she spent inside her egg and if she remembers anything. And this was after Violet already handed in a report which says that Indarna, like most dragons who hatch late, doesn't remember anything from before she hatched. As a result of Professor Grady's dragon trying to interrogate Indarna and Ten combo wombo slapped this dragon short of a few neck scales. Yes, as you should, divas. Hit him again. But the thing that's weird here is that we know that Indarna's lying. Because for the last 2 books, she's been saying that she specifically waited until Violet's 18th birthday to hatch because she knew what Violet was, which suggests that she had information from the outside world while she was in her egg and could still kind of make somewhat sentient decisions. And because she told us that over the last 2 books, we know that she then remembers pre-hatching. But the weird thing about this conversation is Violet doesn't flag either in her internal monologue or to Imogen that she knows that Indarna is lying, which I feel like is really weird. I don't know whether this is a plot hole or if Violet does know that Indarna's lying, she just doesn't want Professor Grady to find out, but just didn't feel the need to mention that in her internal monologue, which is very out of character for Violet. I don't know, but if in the next book, Violet's like, Indarna, you do remember things from before you hatched, don't you? And Indarna's like, yes, I do. I'm going to be really annoyed because we already knew that, babe. You already knew that. Anyway, all of this is to say that it's starting to look like the dragons are sus as hell. To everyone except every character in this book who's bonded to a dragon, apparently. At this point, Violet and Imogen go to see Billboard Music Award top streaming song nominee Jack Harlow. Heaton and Emery are the guards on duty at this point, and they're playing cards. And Emery says that Heaton has unusually good luck with cards, to which Heaton says, Zinal is with me. And Zinal is, apparently, the god of luck. Yeah, we are so heavy on the god mentions at this point. They are becoming increasingly more specific the longer this book goes on. You can already see where this is going, can't you? Heaton is, of course, our resident non-binary character. Also, side note, whilst we're here, in my Fourth Wing recap, I said that Heaton being a token MB was a bit disappointing because I was really hoping for more substantial non-binary character rep. I do stand by that. I would really love to see some more meaningful representation for non-binary characters, whether that means they're part of Quest Squad, or they're the villain, or they're the main character, God forbid. But I also don't want it to be a situation where including gender non-conforming characters becomes a damned if you do, damned if you don't moment, where authors who do include characters who are gender non-conforming, even just as like side characters, like Heaton is, they end up getting shit for including them because it feels like they're just a token character. At the end of the day, non-binary representation is very much needed in media, and the Empyrean series is one of the biggest series globally, or at least in the West right now. Having a non-binary character present in that series is still significantly more than what a lot of book series are doing, which they don't even have MB rep of any kind. So I do want to give like a little bit of praise, because even though it's like crumbs, we're getting crumbs of representation, it's still a step in the right direction, and I do want to at least say that that is a positive thing. And I don't want authors to start feeling like they're getting criticized more for including token characters of gender non-conforming identities, because two things can be true at once. You can want more substantial representation and also be glad that there is at least some representation. Do you know what I mean? So I think I went a little bit hard on it in Fourth Wing, and actually I'm just glad Heaton's here, y'all. I'm just happy. Heaton, the icon that they are, lets Violet and Imogen go into Jack Harlow's cell, which, by the way, is the same cell that Violet was damn near tortured to death in by Major Varish back in Iron Flame. And Vi's internal monologue at this point is, Jack doesn't just look like shit. He looks like death. Yeah, not good. Bro is hanging on to life by a single thread, apparently. He is not channeled in a while. He's drained the entire life out of the cell that he's in, and there's no more magic that he can touch. Violet reckons he's got like a week to live, maybe, if he's lucky. At this point, Violet pulls out the magic alloy from within her conduit, which is charged with enough power to keep Jack alive for at least a week. And she starts like holding it in front of him like he's a dog and it's a treat. And he's like, here, Jackie Jack, here, Jack. Which, I'm going to be honest, not sure this is her brightest idea ever. Have you ever seen Gremlins, the movie Gremlins? It's like, yeah, it's given don't feed him after midnight. I just don't know why Violet is battery power in the venin. Basically, Violet's come up to him with a deal, right? She goes, you answer my questions, and in exchange, you can have either A, an alloy that'll keep you charged up for another week of life, or B, cyanide. She basically offers him like a vial of poison so he can have a quick way out if that's what he fancies. And if I'd rather meet Malik, he challenges. Does your kind meet Malik? I counter, setting the alloy just out of reach and pulling one of the glass vials from my arm strap when he doesn't respond. Unfortunately for us, because this little cockroach will never die, he goes for the alloy. She wants American Music Awards Collaboration of the Year winner Jack Harlow to answer 4 questions. The first question is basically a test to see whether or not he will tell the truth. So she asks him a question that she already knows the answer to, which actually is very smart, and I low-key wouldn't have thought of that. But Violet asks if the venin can sense each other, which we already know is true because Xaden can do it. Jack confirms, yes, they can. He says that newly turned venin can't hide themselves, but mavens and other high-ranking venin can. So they could be surrounded by venin and not know. Oh, yeah, I fear that's going to be a problem later. Violet then asks if they need to be taught how to channel, and he says the ones with no magic experience would need to be taught, but riders already know how to channel, so it's pretty easy for them. Power should be accessible to everyone strong enough to wield it, not just who they see fit. You conveniently see me as the villain, but you're bonded to 2. What was that, Jack Harlow? Why is the only character in this book that is questioning the intentions of the dragons Jack Harlow? And why am I agreeing with him? This is our first canonical mention that perhaps the dragons are not as good as we think they are. Which, when you combine with the fact that Xaden has said that they were low-key building their own army with how they were choosing their riders, and Terran saying he knows who and what Violet Sorringale is in Fourth Wing, things are starting to sound real sus at Dragon headquarters. Violet then asks if Jack knows what the Venin have planned, and he's like, absolutely not, because they're not stupid and they don't trust newbies with information, like important plans. The final question that Violet asks is, can we cure Veninism? And he's like, you talk like I'm a disease, when what I really am is free. He wavers. Well, free in part. We trade some of our autonomy in exchange for unfettered access to power. Maybe you see it as a loss of our soul, but we aren't burdened by conscience or weakened by emotional attachment. We advance based on our own capabilities, our own talents, and not at the whim of some creature. There is no cure because magic does not negotiate, and we do not wish to be cured. Yeah, it's not looking good for our boy Xaden. At this point, because she keeps her bargains, she gives Jack Harlow the alloy and he slurps it up like me in a Five Guys milkshake. She then asks Jack why he answered her questions and not upper management's, because they've been questioning him for a while and he said nothing. And Jack then goes, did you scream for Ryerson to save you when they locked you down here and broke your bones? I'm sorry? Blood drains from my face. He did not just ask me that. Jack leans forward. Did you cry for Ryerson when they strapped you to the chair and watched your blood fill the cracks between the stones on its way to the drain? I only ask because I swear I can feel it when I lie on the floor. All your pain singing to me like a lullaby. I flinch. There. Jack's smile sharpens and chills with sickening excitement. That look right there is why I chose to answer your questions. For the satisfaction of us both knowing that I can still cut you and I don't have to lift a blade. At this point, Violet's like, yeah, pain is not new to me, Jack. I've been in pain this entire series. And honestly, Violet, same. Jack's like, what's from stopping me from telling upper management at big government that you just came in here and fed me an alloy that's going to keep me alive for a week? It would be pretty hard to tell them something you don't remember, babe. And then our girl CFO of I Will Alter Your Memories Industries, Imogen, steps forward. That's right. They've done a Q&A meet and greet with Jack Harlow and then wiped his memories of it. You know what? I like the Violet Imogen duo. I'm sure this is a collab that is not going to come up again later. Memory erasing done, Violet and Imogen leave the chamber, only to find Rhee, Riddick, and Sawyer all waiting outside. To which Imogen rightfully goes, for fuck's sake, can't you four do anything alone? The next chapter's opening note, by the way, is very funny. It literally says that head scribe Markham has had Yesenia transferred over to Professor Grady because she has failed her exams and is no longer able to be in the Adept program. Gagged. Not our top performing scribe bestie Yesenia. We later find out that it's not because she didn't study. No, it's because Chief Scribe Markham essentially designed an impossible exam specifically for her so that he had an excuse to fail her and kick her out of the Adept program in order to punish her for her role in the revolution and for still being besties with Violet. Knowledge is very important to me unless it would progress the plot too far. Sorringale. Yeah. Justice for Yesenia. As the gang are making their way down to the archives, they tease Sawyer for being freshly shaven for Yesenia. That's right, he's got a crush. But he's like, no, I did not get out of bed and shower and freshly shaved for her. I actually freshly showered and shaved for the woodcarver this morning. He's coming to make me a little wooden leg. He does hint at this point that he's tempted to make his own leg. And Violet's like, yes, Diva, you absolutely should do that. Use your signet for metallurgy. Make yourself a little metal leg. Unfortunately for Sawyer, they do keep teasing him about Yesenia until he starts clapping back at each of them. He says, Rhee, you're one to talk with your on-again, off-again girlfriend. Riddick, you leapfrog beds like a frog. And Violet, you and Xaden bicker like a married couple. A frog? That's the best you can do. A frog! Tara and I are old news. She shoots a sideways glance my way. But he's right. You and Ryerson bicker like you've been married 50 years and neither of you wants to do the dishes. That's not true, I protest as Sawyer nods. Agreed, Riddick says. And it's always the same fight. He lifts his hands to his chest. I'll trust you if you stop keeping secrets. He drops his hand and scowls. It's my secretive nature that attracted you, and why can't you just stay out of harm's way for 5
minutes. Ree laughs so hard she nearly chokes. I narrow my gaze on Riddoch. Keep talking and I'll plant my dagger somewhere that prevents all frog-like activities.
They're speaking facts. However, I do not like this because this very clearly felt like a way for Yaros to acknowledge how much everyone complained about how much Vi and Xaden had the same fight in Iron Flame. Like, yeah, the dialogue makes sense, it's in character, it's enjoyable, but also it's so transparently see, I'm self-aware. At this point, Sawyer points out the leadership are probably chuffed that Zaddy and Vi are together because they're going to make really strong rider babies, and he thinks Melgrin, is in General Melgrin, will take them to a temple of their choosing himself, introducing the idea that religion and temples play a role in marriages in this world, which, low-key, 3 books in, feels a little late to be finally integrating the gods you've been mentioning ad hoc throughout the entire plot into the plot, but here we are. We then get told at this point that Violet stopped praying to Loyal and Hedion 2 years ago out of spite, saying that Love and Wisdom hadn't exactly shown up when she needed them to, which conveniently was, I'm assuming, right before Fourth Wing started, therefore justifying why she's not been to a temple since. With this final line, we now have a full lineup of the gods and their respective virtues. Are you ready? We've got Amari, who is Queen of the Gods, Malik, the god of death, Dun, the goddess of war and strength, Zinal, the god of luck and fortune, Hedion, the god of wisdom, and Loyal, the goddess of love. Unfortunately, you will need to remember them because they do come up later. Now, if you're good at maths, you've probably realised that's 6 gods. Can we think of anything else in this book series that famously came in a sextet? Anyway, they see Yesnir and they've come to the conclusion that the Irid that Big T, aka Jennifer Coolidge Venin, mentioned earlier is actually short for iridescent. And they've worked that out because Andana is sparkly. Very nice. Sawyer then spills the tea that Yesnir was kicked out of the Adept program because they came up with a ridiculous test, the thing that we found out at the beginning of the chapter. And because of this, she is now researching under Professor Grady. The same Professor Grady who is currently head of Quest Squad. That's right, Yesnir is now doing research for the team to find out where they should go and visit first in their search for the Irids. Yesnir mentions that in one of the books that she was reading, there was a mention about one of the Isle Kingdoms supporting an uprising, but that after it was mentioned, the pages following it in the book had been ripped out. Yes, it's giving big government censorship. When is it not? So basically, they've worked out that they need Violet's dad's unpublished research, as it's probably the only one that will have answers on this particular uprising. The reason this is a big deal, by the way, is because no one in Navarre was supposed to have contact with any of the Isle Kingdoms in like yonks. But this uprising was about 100 years ago, which is news to everyone because 100 years ago is like way less time than the like hundreds of years that they thought contact with the Isles had been severed for. The only kink in this plan is that Violet's dad's unpublished research is hidden inside her mum, General Lilith's, quarters, which of course no longer belong to General Lilith following her untimely demise to a stone, and in fact now belong to General Atos. So Violet realizes at this point they need to get former childhood BFF Dane Atos to retrieve her father's research from her mother's old office, now occupied by famous orphan hater Daddy Atos. And this is because the doors around the offices are blood warded to bloodlines or marriage. Later on in Battle Brief, it is confirmed that sages and mavens have signets, which, by the way, big government and the Flyers have been fighting Venin now for decades, right? You're telling me that none of them noticed that the Venin prior to this moment had signets. Like, Violet is the first person to see a Venin use a signet, and in a mere 10 days from that happening, big government are able to confirm through 3 separate accounts from the front lines that both sages and mavens have signets. That just doesn't make any sense, does it? Because what this now means is that the Venin have always had signets, but for some unknown reason, they've not been using them and they've been keeping it a secret just so Theophany can do a lightning reveal to Violet Sorringale. Or they have had signets and have been using signets this whole time, like decades worth of fighting, but big government were too stupid to realise. Just tell me that you didn't originally plan for Venin to be able to have signets and then you changed your mind 3 books in, because that doesn't make any sense. This book is just one giant retcon, honestly. All of that to say, top tier Venin can now have signets, which is very convenient if you want to be able to say in book 4 and 5 that potentially some of the riders could be top tier Venin, and we would never know because Jack Harlow said they can disguise themselves. Yeah, that's right, I'm calling it now. Big Brother Brennan the Venin or comic relief character Riddick the Venin. I also reckon one of the nice professors, either Cowrie, Emeterio, or Devera, is also a Venin. Just for shits and giggles. And speaking of Devera, the gang are back in Devera's class and they get handed an anthology of texts from Orisha about killing Venin, all of which contain information that the Flyers already know. Yes, Catriona, you are more well-read than Violet. Devera then says that they are adding 3 more classes to the curriculum to better prepare the students for what they're facing. And she basically says what we've all been thinking since the start of this book series. Are you ready, divas? She says, death is no longer an acceptable outcome when you face your classmates. War is over. That's right, divas. They finally decided to stop murdering kids. Round of applause. Yeah, Atos is going to be so upset. It only took them all almost dying for them to realise that maybe killing off 70% of your most powerful soldiers would actually be a bad idea. Also, this does suggest that the whole murdering kids thing was entirely optional, by the way. Because in Fourth Wing, we were told that the reason the riders have to basically be dying all the time is because dragons don't like weak riders, right? But clearly the dragons don't want to get murked by the Venin, which is why they are fine with the riders now being able to not kill each other. But the dragons have always known about the Venin. So, did this imply that this whole time, the dragons would have been fine with the riders not killing each other? So I'm taking this to mean it's canon that the dragons didn't really care whether the riders killed each other or not, and big government were just murdering kids for the love of the game. Devera says on account of the fact that the top Venin now have Signets, one of the new classes they've introduced is Signet sparring, and they've brought in the Eastern Wing's most powerful rider to help. Who is the Eastern Wing's most powerful rider, you might ask? That would be Zaddy Ryerson. Yes, it would. Xaden walks in and Violet's super excited to see him until she realizes what him being a teacher means for their relationship. Oh shit, what's wrong? He asks. I think our relationship just ended. That's right, divas. Another Ofsted nightmare has just hit Basquiat's college. We've got teacher ex-student trope. After class, Xaden walks off with Professor Cowrie and Violet goes to find Dane to ask him to help her steal her father's research from his dad's quarters. She finds Dane with Bodhi outside of Professor Cowrie's office waiting for Xaden. Professor Cowrie comes out and is like, oh, I don't think y'all are here to see me. And he skedaddles, leaving them to talk to Xaden. Professor Ryerson. Dane's tone isn't exactly respectful as Xaden fills the doorway. My pulse leaps and I drink in the sight of him. Stubbled cheeks, full lips, and gorgeous eyes. There's no hint of red to be seen. Violet? Xaden ignores Dane and his cousin, his voice sliding over my skin like velvet. A word in private? Not a good idea. I shake my head slowly. I'm certain I've had worse ones. He holds out his hand. You're now a professor. I'm a cadet. And? Xaden glowers at me. Oh, shit. Dane says quietly. Article 8, Section 1 of the Code of Conduct. Wait, you two broke up? Bodhi's voice rises. Yes, I answer. No, Xaden says at the same time, glaring at his cousin, then jerking his gaze to mine. No, he repeats. I mean, if you're our new professor, then the code applies, at least for as long as you hold the position. Dane muses. Can't think of a single piece of codex that overrides it. No one asked you, Atos, Xaden warms. Don't blame me. I didn't write the code. Dane backs into the hall with his hands up. Nor did I accept the job. Well, I have class, so good luck handling this one. Bodhi hurries after Dane. A lot of people have taken Bodhi's reaction in this scene, by the way, as further evidence that Bodhi has a secret crush on Violet. There are a few more instances of this in this book, but I think Yaros, outside of the books, has confirmed that Bodhi doesn't want Violet, he just wants what Xaden has, which would be like a relationship and Tyrandor, I guess, which does kind of make me think that at a certain point, Bodhi is gonna have to take over for Xaden and basically fill his shoes. And I have a feeling that he's going to do that with Catriona. This is my guess now. I reckon Bodhi's going to end up with Catriona and they're going to end up ruling Tyrandor together. Or something similar. Anyway, Violet and Xaden then go and talk in private in Cowrie's office, and Zaddy basically tells her that the babysitting thing with Garrick isn't really working out because he was, quote, dangerously close when Xaden lost control and, drained from the earth again. He then leans against a painting of the first 6 riders' dragons, and Violet then goes, but not 7. Basically, at this point, I'm assuming that she's saying that it's kind of weird that no one documents the fact that there were 7 first dragons, even if one of those dragons never took a rider. But at this point, I do just have to say, isn't it a bit odd that there are 6 gods but 7 first dragons? 6 first riders, but 7 dragons, which could mean nothing. Violet at this point is like, we have to break up because this is against the codex and we live by the codex, to which Xaden replies, I live by you. He then says that he plans to ask for an exemption, which is basically where you can kind of petition a senior officer in order to get, dare I say, an exemption from this line of the codex on the basis of the fact that it's a temporary position that Xaden's filling, and also because they had a pre-existing relationship. Unfortunately, however, the one rule that General Atos lives by is hating on orphans, and of course, General Atos barges into the room knowing that they want to ask for an exemption, and Zaddy asks for the exemption. He's like, hey, Mr. Atos, can I have an exception? And General Atos deadass just goes, denied. He says, yeah, I know Melgrim wants you here, even though I think there are better people suited to the post. So I'm going to obey it because it is Melgren's army, technically. But this is my school. One violation of the codex and you're out, Buster. I'm not being funny, but this man is just a comic book villain at this point, which is why I'm certain that he's not Venin. I just think his only personality trait is beefing with his son's friends. But yeah, from this point on, Violet and Xaden agree to keep their relationship on the down low, because he can't afford to get kicked out of the wards on account of the whole draining from the earth situation, which now means that General Atos is not only the #1 hater of orphans, but also the #1 cockblocker in Basgiath. After that, Dane walks Violet to class and he agrees to help her steal from his father, saying that his dad is, quote, beyond help. He basically says that his dad is going away next week and he's going to steal it then. The next Monday, Violet is in a meeting with Captain Grady and his chosen squad for the quest to locate Andana's kind, including designated team researcher Yesenia. Both Vi and Yesenia very quickly realise that nobody has a single clue what's going on, partially because the map that Grady's got in the centre of the table it just has like some random hand-drawn blobs for the aisles. Yeah, it's going really well. Xaden walks into the meeting, uninvited, because Violet mentally told him what was happening. Somebody around the table says, this is a closed meeting. Lieutenant forgot his name says. Yeah, I forgot his name we did, because I don't know who any of these people are. Find out via their telepathic exchange that Violet and Xaden haven't actually seen each other in days because of all of Atos' disciples literally following both of them around to ensure that they don't get any alone time together. Yeah, it's rough. It is rough. Xaden is also sleeping in the teacher's quarters, which is on like the other side of the school. So there's no sharing a bedtime. It's very sad. Basically at this point, some of the people around the table try and tell Xaden to leave and he's like, let's just skip this because let's be honest, Terran is not going anywhere without Scale. And then they all just kind of have to agree. They then make all of their introductions. Yeah, that's right. There are more new characters in this book. So you've got Captain Henson, who's an air wielder, Lieutenant Pugh, whose signet is Farsight. You've got Lieutenant Foley, who's an agrarian. Cadet Beanhaven, that's Aura Beanhaven of Trying to Roast Dane Alive fame, who is a fire wielder. And then you've got Lieutenant Winsher, who is from the infantry. She's not a rider. Basically, what we learn from these introductions is that all of these riders are Navarre's riders. There are none from the Aretian riot, and they all have the most common signets you can get. At this point, Xaden mentally rose Captain Grady to Violet by saying it's like he just took a list of riders with the most common signets and just started choosing them. He then out loud says, bruv, where are the shield signets? To which Grady's like, yeah, I've asked for a rider with a shield signet from somewhere, and Xaden's like, get Mira. Grady's just like, yeah, I have. She's the one that I've asked for. And everyone's like, oh, right. Grady then tells them that Cenarion has given them 6 months to find the 7th breed dragon, and after every single trip, they have to fly all the way back to Navarre and report on like what they found, which Xaden and Violet both agree is a huge waste of time. Grady then says that he wants to search the north coastline first, close to the Emerald Sea, because, quote, sailors never come back from there, which he believes is because of dragons. I personally want to believe that that's because of like some sea monsters or something. I want sea monster lore. My actual guess is that there's either someone with a memory wiping signet or a very powerful water wielding signet, which they're using to just like murk sailors in order to protect something super secret that we're not allowed to know about until book 4. Internally, Violet disagrees with Captain Grady's assessment. She reckons they should go south, specifically to a place called Deverelli and the Isles. You may remember the name Deverelli from Iron Flame when Violet was visiting Viscount Thesaurus and she wore a dress made out of Deverelli silk. The reason she thinks this, by the way, is related to the missing journal pages that suggested that the Isles were involved in a Courtland uprising years after Navarre allegedly severed contact with the Isles. And for some reason, she now believes that their involvement has something to do with Feathertails. Loki, not sure how she made that jump. Essentially, in Iron Flame, General Atos asks Violet what she knows about the second Courtland uprising, and then I think around the same time asks her about her dad's research on Feathertails, which ties the two of them together. It's a bit wild that she's able to recall a throwaway comment that Atos made a year ago, but cannot connect the fact that people keep saying she commands power of the sky to the fables of the Baron. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me, Violet? A lot of this book is Violet ignoring very obvious things that she should be asking questions about, and yet somehow connecting things that seemingly aren't related at all. So I don't understand how she can be this intelligent and this stupid at the same time. But there we are. Dragons mentioned with Isles makes me think we should go south, which definitely would make sense if anyone had mentioned dragons and Isles together. But as of right now, nobody has. Basically, it's not particularly clear. She has connected the second Courtland uprising to the Feathertails because of her dad's research. And because the second Courtland uprising was supported by an Isle, she's gone, okay, Isles and Feathertails together makes me think we need to go to Deverelli. Anyway, the meeting adjourns, saying that everyone needs to start getting their supplies together because they're going to leave next month. Violet hangs back because she wants to have a little cuddle with Xaden because they've low-key been flirting mentally the entire meeting. But unfortunately for them, Aura Beanhaven also hangs back. Yeah, Aura Beanhaven has taken over the role of number 1 cockblocker from General Atos, and she is now waiting to escort Violet back to her chambers so that she does not, quote, violate the codex. She basically makes it clear at this point that pretty much all of the Navarian riders are spying on Violet for Atos on account of the fact that they want to make her life as miserable as possible. Which, I'm gonna be honest, still kind of insane when they would all be dead without her, but like, sure. We get like a 4-day time jump at this point, and Violet's squad all arrives at the outdoor amphitheater for Xaden's first Signet sparring class. It's snowing outside, but when they cross into the amphitheater, it's really hot because Xaden has set up weather wards, amongst a bunch of other wards that are like layered to keep powers locked inside the amphitheater. And I'm sure that would be really impressive if I actually had any idea what we were talking about. Oh, side note, at this point, it is mentioned basically every single time Xaden makes an appearance in this book that he is wearing 2 swords strapped to his back. Like 1, 2, right? And I don't remember him having 2 swords strapped to his back in the previous books. But if he did, it is not mentioned nearly as much as it is mentioned in this book. I'm not joking. Basically every single scene that I have described to you thus far with Xaden and Violet, Xaden has 2 swords strapped to his back, and they're explicitly mentioned as well. And I'm not gonna lie, this descriptor is doing my head in. Not because it doesn't look cool. It does look cool. I understand that. But if you want me to believe that seriously, these are elite fighters, right? You need to explain to me why Xaden Ryerson has strapped not 1, but 2 swords to his back. I'm not being funny. That is the least practical place to put a sword if you're going to be involved in combat. That is the hardest to unsheath position you could possibly put them in. Only justification for this is that he's unsheathing them with shadows, and therefore he doesn't have to like awkwardly, because to do this motion you are exposing your entire body. You're just not going to do that when you're fighting Dark Wielders of Death, are you? You're just not. I'm baffled. But anyway, just imagine Xaden Ryerson with 2 swords strapped to his back. at every scene. We then get a quick mental catch up between Xaden and Violet because they've not really seen each other in ages, and Vi kind of mentions that she hasn't found anything on the cure or on a dragon scorching a venin the way that Andarna did in the text that Queen Maria and the Viscount Takara sent her. I don't remember where this is mentioned in the book, but Terran's justification for why Andarna's flame toasted and roasted the venin is because he said that a dragon's first fire is their most powerful, and he reckons that's why Andarna's flame did it. Which I thoroughly suspect is not the case, but it sure does make an awful lot more sense than whatever Violet and Andarna thought they were doing with changing the venin on the molecular level. Xaden tries to get the attention of the class, but then a student called Lauren basically says that Xaden graduated like a year ago, so what makes him the best person to teach them about signets? At which point Xaden's like, okay, big man, come on then, step up, big guy. And to Lauren's credit, he does. He gets up. He stands toe-to-toe with Zaddy Ryerson. Basically, Lauren is a metallurgist, which is the same signet that Sawyer has. And he makes his swords really pointy and then points them at Xaden Ryerson, which, not gonna lie, you can tell he's a metallurgist because this man has balls of steel to raise a blade at Xaden Ryerson. He then makes a comment about the fact that Sawyer should be here to watch this man speedrun his own public humiliation. And Rhee says, yeah, well, everything I've done to convince him has failed. And there's like a little saltiness in it, like she feels like Violet is kind of insulting her leadership abilities, which wasn't Vi's intention. And I'm not joking, this interaction literally ends here, but it's one of my favorite interactions in the book because it really shows Rhiannon's character. And I really wish we'd had more of that energy in Iron Flame or Fourth Wing, because that really does flesh out her character a lot in very few words. Not that we were worried about word count, given how long Iron Flame was, but there we are. Basically, Lauren attacks Xaden, and Xaden wields shadows and strangles him. Yeah, in the words of Cat's Eye, it's getting gnarly. At this point, Riddick says, I can't tell if I'm terrified of your boyfriend or in love with him. To which Cat's like, you can be both. Trust me, babe. To which Traeger is like, you shouldn't be either. Yeah, that's right. Traeger fancies Cat. And if you don't remember who Traeger is, that's perfectly understandable. He is one of the flyers in the second year squad. Xaden, most powerful rider of his generation, leader of the revolution, Duke of Tyrandor, teacher of Basganath Ryerson, proceeds to put Lauren on his ass. And after that little teaching moment, Xaden tells Lauren to get his ass back into his squad, and that man has been very much humbled. And not just him, because Xaden then makes every single person in the amphitheater 1v1 him. And to be honest, this entire chapter is just a flex of Xaden showing how much cooler and hotter he is than literally anyone else. He tells everyone that with the exception of a couple of signets, basically just violets, anything they wield on the sparring mat will stay contained onto the sparring mat and not hit the people in the crowd because of the wards that he put up. And if it doesn't stay on the mat, it will stay within the amphitheater. So students shouldn't hold back because, quote, the venin won't. Xaden then proceeds to win every single match, including his 1v1 with Catriona, which Catriona gets really mad about. Neither Cat nor Marion get close before they're off the mat and sent stumbling in our direction. But Cat is the only one of the pair who looks momentarily devastated at having failed. You're gonna get over him at some point, right? Traeger mutters as Cat falls back in line. Seems like a waste of time to chase someone who doesn't want you when there are plenty of people who do. Cat's gaze snaps in his direction, and I lift my brows. Go Traeger. Yeah, go Traeger indeed. I'm starting to think that line of dialogue means he deserves a place on the board. Xaden saves Violet for last and basically says, no exceptions, Sorengale. And to which Violet walks up and she mentally says to him, do me a favor. Don't let me hurt you. They start fighting and Xaden immediately plunges the entirety of the mat into darkness, meaning that nobody can see them. They have the opportunity to do something really funny right now. He then proceeds to teach her the difference between his shadows. And this bit confused me a bit because the way he describes it makes it sound as if he can create shadows, but he can't, because we were told in the last book that Xaden can only wield what's already there. But basically he tells her to learn the difference and follow the strongest threads because those ones are him. And if she does that, she can locate him in the darkness. That's right, we're playing hide and seek with Xaden the Venin. She is the only one that he will teach this to because you have to learn this for both our sakes. And then he kisses her while no one can see. He then immediately walks off And I don't mean walks off as in just like off the mat. He starts walking off the mat up the amphitheater steps. Yeah, that's right. This man does dramatic exits as well as dramatic entrances now. Violet's like mentally shouting after him like, why me? Xaden! And then he ends the chapter with, because you're the only one capable of killing me. Like I said before, get this man into RADA. And after that, all of the squad go for a drink at the pub, which, you know, that's perfectly understandable given what's just happened. They discuss the fact that Lynx and Arik, who are both first-year riders in their squad, still haven't gotten their signets yet. And that is bad news because remember, if you don't manifest your signet within a certain time frame after threshing, you basically explode. Yeah, that is law in this world. They then have a very long, like, page-and-a-half conversation about gods and temples. Another one. I'm just going to give you the TLDR of this conversation. The temples to Malak and Dun are disproportionately big near Basgiath because death and war are the things that are most on their mind. Amari has the biggest temple, suggesting that Navarre favours Amari in general. Amari is the queen of the gods, remember? Scribes know that knowledge and wisdom are different things, so scribes do not pray to Hedion, who is the god of wisdom. Big Lilith, R.I.P., wasn't religious, which Violet thought was odd because she would have thought her mother would favour Dun, who is the god of war. Violet also drops the law that she spent most of her time in Amari's temple growing up, but then swapped to Malak after her father died. We also find out that Riddick favours Zinel, god of luck. Yeah, wonder if that's going to be important later. At this point, Dane comes to find Violet in the pub and basically says he can't sneak anyone into his father's rooms with him, so she is going to have to trust him with the location of her father's secret unpublished research, which she debates for like 2 lines of dialogue and there's like, I'm shit out of other options, so sure. So she gives Dane the location of her father's research. And then we end on a very dramatic, for better or worse, my fate rests in the hands of Dane Atos. The next chapter's opening note, I think, is quite important, so I'm just going to give you the TLDR on it. It's basically a letter from Violet's father to her, telling her that she should trust no one. Specifically, he ties truth and failing his kids to them walking the parapet, which could mean that he doesn't trust the college. But you have to remember that his wife is famously in charge of that college, and the only quadrant that actually walks the parapet are the riders, which to me suggests that Daddy Asher Sorengale maybe doesn't trust the dragons. Either way, this note is not super reassuring given the interaction of the last chapter, but we don't have to worry about it for long because at this point, Sloane, first-year rider and sister of much beloved and now deceased rider Liam, comes to find Violet. This is like her first major show up in this book so far. They have a little bit of a chat where Sloane's like, sorry for sacrificing your mother for the wards. It's all super lighthearted, as I'm sure you can imagine. Sloane says that she has duty in the archives and she's brought Violet some books. One of these books happens to be from Dane Bloody Atos. Yes, that's right. It's Daddy Sorengale's research. Also, please note that Dane trusted Sloane, which could mean nothing. Now, if you were thinking, yay, Violet's got Daddy Sorengale's research, we're going to get some answers, you'd be wrong, because it turns out that the research is locked, and not with like one of those cute little padlocks that you used to put on diaries when you were like 9. It's a 6-letter lock, and if Violet puts in the wrong word, vials inside of the book, as well as some magic wards on the book, will destroy all of the pages. Basically, it's just medieval 2-factor authentication. Lucky for Violet, though, there is a note tucked into the book to help you solve the code, which says, first love is irreplaceable. The whole squad then go to Signet sparring, featuring members of the infantry this time as observers, and the entire squad basically have a chat about what they think the note could mean. Obviously, they suggest it being Lilith, but Violet's like, nah, that's way too easy, and I reckon my dad would want me to overthink it, so it's definitely not Lilith. Riddick then suggests that it's Brennan, or Brennan's first love. We then get dialogue from Violet, which says that because there's 9 years between her and Brennan, they weren't exactly sharing romance stories of their first love, but she mentions that Mira said that Brennan was in a relationship with a rider a year or 2 older than him, which could mean nothing. Now, do I think that this suggestion from Riddick was completely out of base? Yeah. Do I think the reason they put it in here was for that one line of dialogue about Brennan's previous relationship so that they can reveal later that him and Nowlin were boning? Absolutely. So I'm adding this to my armor that Brennan and Nowlin were together. Nowlin turned Venin. Brennan's a sock puppet with his rune-shaped little scar. Riddick then goes on to suggest that it could be Violet's first love, and that first love couldn't have been Xaden because, quote, "You hadn't even seen Xaden when your dad met Malik." I don't know what accent this is, but it's progressively getting worse and probably offensive. There is a bit of a fan theory related to this line, by the way, because it notes that Violet hadn't seen Xaden, but it doesn't state that Xaden hadn't seen her. Okay, trust me, I don't know, I saw this on Reddit. Essentially, Violet lived at Basgiath for 5 years prior to enlisting in the Riders Quadrant because her mum obviously ran the school, so there's a chance that he could have seen her skulking around the grounds of Basgiath. But the main evidence to support this kind of theory is Xaden says in Fourth Wing, I think, to Violet, "I've been yours for longer than you could ever imagine." The group then press Violet about who her first love is, to which Arik turns round and he's like, "How many letters is it?" And Violet says 6, to which Arik replies, "I mean, it fits." And Riddick's like, "Excuse me, is the first year privy to information that we are not privy to? How does he know the name of your first love?" But we don't get any more information on that because Xaden interrupts to say that Garrick has come so that they can practice fighting against a very good wind wielder. Ree then decides that the squad should fight him as a team because there's no rules that say they can't. Garrick flirts with Imogen a bit and Riddick says they should just sleep together, and then goes, "Oh, said that out loud, didn't I? Oopsie." The group attack. Riddick fires a bunch of ice shards at Garrick, which he immediately blows back in his face, almost spearing Violet in the head, by the way. Luckily, Violet quickly turns and grabs Ree and they hit the deck before they get impaled by ice. Xaden gets really angry at this point, steps onto the mat and says, "Too close!" He's given overprotective alpha dog. Violet has to mentally be like, "Bro, chill, I'm fine. Get your feet off the mat before people think you're giving me special treatment," which of course he is, because he's Xaden Ryerson. Duh. Basically, Quinn then uses her signet for astral projection to project lots of versions of herself around Garrick, whilst Catriona heightens his emotions to give him, like, confusion. This wombo combo gives Violet enough time to grab a dagger and chuck it at Garrick's feet. He then uses his wind to blow it off course even more so that it's behind him, thinking Violet was aiming for, like, his body, but she wasn't because she's not trying to spear a friend. Violet then gets out her little Wii remote, not sure where she got a new alloy from after she gave it to hungry boy Jack the Venin over here, but she then strikes lightning and it hits behind Garrick and he goes, "You missed," to which she says, "Did I?" And it turns out Violet was never going to strike Garrick because she doesn't want to kill him. She was always going to strike the dagger, which is why she originally threw it at his feet. Garrick turns around, sees that the dagger is like melted, and he visibly pales, to which Violet goes, "If I wanted you dead, you'd be dead. Eat him up, eat him up." Xaden at this point he's smirking. He's very proud. He was like, "God, I love you. You're so hot and sexy. Haha." Mentally, of course, because he's her teacher now, and that's illegal. But unfortunately, Xaden is not the only one who enjoyed the light show, because they're interrupted by, and I kid you not, the slow clapping of a man walking down the amphitheater steps. How is anyone in this school taking anything seriously ever? Honestly, they're just a bunch of failed drama kids. Truly. Who is this man walking down the amphitheater steps, slow clapping? Well, I'll be damned if it isn't the Crown Prince of Navarre, Holden, aka Arik's bloody brother. Violet at this point is like, "Oh, shit." She notes that Holden is just as beautiful as she remembers, with stunning green eyes. Yeah, all the royals in this book have green eyes. Vi then quickly mentally tells Xaden to hide Arik, because if Holden sees him, he's gonna know that he's Cam, and that he's hiding out in the Riders Quadrant and not actually missing. Violet then goes and sits next to Holden, largely to buy Arik time to bugger off, and those two have a little chat. At which point, in case you hadn't guessed it, it's officially confirmed that Violet used to date the Crown Prince of Navarre. Yes, they are exes. I'm not being funny, but Violet Sorrengail must have crazy game. She's bagged a Crown Prince and Xaden Ryerson. Like that, she's 2 for 2. Unfortunately for us, it's not only confirmed that she used to date Prince Halden, it is then confirmed that he cheated on her with his professor, and she walked in on them mid-coitus. Yeah, that's crazy work. And Holden's justification for why he was banging his professor was because he was grieving the loss of his twin brother. The twin brother who, by the way, Xaden murdered. It's so messy. He murdered him during threshing, so no one ever found out because, like, what happens in the woods with the dragons, happens in the woods with the dragons, I guess. But like, that is so messy. Violet's boyfriend murdered her ex-boyfriend's twin brother, who is the Crown Prince of Navarre. Anyway, it turns out that Anna Wilshire of Quest Squad fame is actually Halden's personal infantry guard. And she's a redhead, which is important because Violet notes that Halden has a thing for redheads because his teacher was also a redhead. Very good. They have some banter back and forth, and I won't lie, Halden's talking a big game. At this point, he brings out a letter for Violet from Viscount Dracarys. By the way, was literally addressed to Violet, and Halden opened it for some reason. Yeah, literally everyone's just watching Violet's mail at this point. The letter basically says that Dracarys has got the books that she wanted, and he's also set up a meeting between her and King Courtland of Deverelli. Only problem? Courtland is like Dracarys, and he likes collecting valuable things. And so Dracarys has promised him a very valuable citrine gemstone in exchange for the meeting, which all sounds great until you find out that that gemstone is currently stuck in occupied Venin territory outside of the wards, and I will give you no coins for working out whose job it is to go and fetch it. Yeah, Quest Squad are going on another side quest. This is side quest number 2 for those who are counting. We do get a bit of lore on this gemstone. It is basically like an amplifier for lesser magic, and if Vi gets it, Halden says that he will order Professor Grady to change their first searching place to wherever Violet wants to go, which is south towards the Isles, not north. He kind of fancies Violet, and Violet's like, you don't really fancy me, you just like things that you can't have. And he's like, well, I could have you technically, right? Because you and Ryerson had to break up because he's your teacher now. And Violet's like, we are doing things in line with the codex, if that's what your father wants to know. And Halden's like, I wasn't asking for my father, I was asking for me. Halden basically is like, oh, can you not go on a date with me because Zaddy Ryerson controls you? You can't say you haven't thought about me, Violet. And Violet's like, no, I literally can, babe. I haven't, truly. But he's like really adamant on getting that dinner date. It's giving desperate. Halden then goes on to say, once you accept that a rider's true love is their dragon, another man hardly seemed like competition. Which, I'm not being funny, are we serious? The plot point pops up less than a chapter ago, for definitely not foreshadowing purposes, by the way, only to be solved by a not at all natural sounding passing comment from Violet Sorrengail's ex. Oh my god. Halden says that he wants another chance with Violet, and then he tries to touch her hair, at which point Xaden Ryerson sends his shadows at him and sends him flying across the amphitheater. Yeah, perfectly reasonable response. Honestly, I would have done the same, Xaden. Hit him again. At this point, Anna, Halden's guard, kind of freaks out, and Violet assumes, oh, so you guys are fucking. Xaden comes over and basically pretends that he was trying to save Prince Halden from a rogue strike that fell off the mat, and it was an accident that he put him through a wall. He then crouches down and says, let's get 3 things straight, Your Highness. First, I have remarkable hearing thanks to the shadows at your very feet. Second, I don't control Violet. Never have, never will. But third, and most importantly, he lowers his voice, she really, honestly, hasn't thought about you. At least not since the second she set eyes on me. I'm going to fucking kill him. The girls are fighting! I do want to say here that Xaden specifically says that Violet honestly hasn't thought about Halden since she set eyes on him. I still believe to this day that Xaden was supposed to be a mind-reading Intrinsic. And for some reason, maybe because fans guessed it, or just because they changed it because they didn't want it to be predictable or whatever, at the last minute, they changed Xaden to be an intentions-reading Intrinsic. Because there are quite a few things in Fourth Wing that perfectly lead to the idea that Xaden is a mind reader. And then also with lines like that, like, oh, she really honestly hasn't thought about you, it just reads so much better and makes a lot more sense if he is a mind-reading Intrinsic. And there is something that comes up later on in this book, which to me kind of proves it. But maybe I'm biased because I also love being right. So Anyway, sparring class ends. Thanks to Holden's perfectly natural speech about dragons being riders' first loves, Violet figures out that the answer to the lock on her father's research is Aimzir, Lilith's dragon. And that's definitely not how you pronounce that, so I'm gonna have to put in a better pronunciation now. Amshir. She punches the password in, and lo and behold, it opens. Woohoo! Thank you, Zinal. To which Ree replies, I think that one might be better directed at Hedion, but I'll take whichever god is with us. Another god mention, just in case you forgot that we are really into gods now. Once Violet opens up the journal, she finds a note that her dad left specifically for her, and lo and behold, his research is on what? The second Courtland uprising and their connection to Feather Tales. Dear Violet, it's my most sincere hope that you are reading this by my side, laughing at the glorious mess that is a first draft. But I fear that may not be the case. If I now walk alongside Malik with your brother, then guard this manuscript carefully. But if the worst has happened and your mother has joined us, then you must protect this knowledge with your very life. Within these pages, you'll find my careful study of the second Courtland uprising. But my daughter, remember what I taught you about history. It is simply a collection of stories, each influenced by those that happened before and steering the ones to come. I wrote this study so that it could be read by others but understood by you. If time is sweet, peruse at leisure. You'll find the connection between the uprising and the pursuit of Feather Tales to be both alarming and enlightening. But if time has indeed run out and you seek the weapon to defeat those you've only learned about through lore, then abandon your robes and ride for Corden. You have always struggled with Crovelish, but I made sure that Dane would be capable should you need him, should he not choose to cross the parapet this summer. If he follows in the footsteps of his father, you must find the strength to let go of your affection for him. From Corden, book passage to Deverelli. You will be safe beyond the reach of magic there, and quietly seek out the merchant Norel Anselm. Take her the rarest item you possess. Be sure it is truly exceptional to be given what you need. Do not send another in your stead. Should you travel under the banner of Navarre, beware their king. He bears grudges and speaks only in profit. I'm so sorry this falls to you, my brightest light. Trust only Mira. Love, Dad. Dun dun dun. Her dad's note says that while he wrote the books for others to read, he believes that Violet will truly understand it. Basically, Violet needs to travel to Corden and then to Deverelli, and then once in Deverelli, she needs to find a merchant called Norel Anselm. She then needs to give Norel the rarest thing she has, and in exchange, Violet will be given something that she needs. This is hinting at side quest 3, by the way, just in case you were wondering. At this point, Xaden appears in her doorway, and it's giving tortured lover. Rhiannon scarpers off. Xaden comes in, and he's like, did you love Holden? And he just can't say anything else. Did you love him? Someone is going to see you. Did you love him? Oh, for Mari's sake. I was with Holden years ago. Yeah, I picked up on that. I picked up on a lot of things he was thinking. I blink. That's not how your Signet. Did you love him? Holy shit. You're actually jealous. Yes, love. I'm jealous. Yeah, you may not have caught that because Xaden quickly interrupted her, but Xaden just said that he caught a lot of what Holden was thinking. Violet says, that's not how your Signet works. To which Xaden just completely ignores her. Now, you would think that if your intentions seeing intrinsic boyfriend suddenly starts acting like he can actually hear people's thoughts, that might be something you want to question him about. However, does she? Absolutely not. Yet another example of Violet Sorrengale ignoring things because it would progress the plot too fast. This, by the way, is the evidence that I have that in my head Yaros always intended for Xaden to become a mind reader, because I'm assuming the justification here is that he's now a mind reader because his Signet got stronger. Either that or he just lied to Violet when he said that he was an intentions seer before and he straight up can read thoughts. Also, not gonna lie, I really don't like the use of love here for Xaden Ryerson. It feels way too British and not something that I think would ever come out of his mouth. But there we are. Violet basically explains that they dated for 7 months when she was 18, so she thought that was love, but it's nothing close to what she feels for Xaden. And Xaden is devastated to hear that she could have loved another person before him. And Violet's like, I get that this is hard for you. Like, it was hard for me with Kat. And he's like, girl, I never loved Kat. I never loved another. Bless him. He's working through his first big emotions. It's hard. And that's not the only thing that's hard, because they start kissing. Yeah, they do. Violet, of course, is DTF, and Xaden's like, nah, stop it, you hound dog. So he restrains her hands above her head using his shadows. Yeah, that's right. It's given Rihanna S and M. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, before Violet can have her way with him, the poor boy, he kind of jumps away because he starts to feel like he's losing control. And then he's like, you need to distract me right now. So naturally, Violet starts talking about her dead dad. Yeah. That'll do it. Basically, Violet says, I need to get to Deverelli, but in order to get to Deverelli and have a meeting with Courtland, I need to retrieve a gemstone, because the gemstone is the cost of the meeting that Viscount Takara set up, and if I get the gemstone, Haldan's gonna let me go. So Xaden's like, okay, let's get the gemstone then. So they just go and get the gemstone then. I'm not being funny. This book is just like a series of things happening that feel like they're happening purely because the writer had a deadline and just was like pulling side quests out of a hat in order to fill out an entire book. I'm gonna be honest. And all of the side quests feel really contrived. Like, there are way more straightforward ways to get to where we need to go, which does sound a bit mean, yes. But like, how many side quests can we possibly fit into a book? Okay, so speed run, because obviously time is getting on. 4 days later, Violet and Grady's team are on the way to get the citrine gem, which is in Anchor, which is beyond the wards. Remember? Violet goes over the wards and she's like, wow, there's a lot of magic here. And Taryn is like, well, there's actually way less than usual because the Venin have been draining it. You just feel like there's more because your Signet's getting stronger and you're becoming more aware of the magic that is available. It is worth noting at this point that Violet says she is overcome with a strange urge to pluck strands from the very sky and weave runes, which could mean nothing. Xaden comes with at this point and he's on the ground doing like a parameter sweep. Violet really wanted him to stay in the air on Sigale, but he's not really in danger from draining from the earth because the Venin have pretty much drained this entire city of magic. Like, it is falling apart. It's basically an abandoned tinderbox, which is super great when you consider that they've got Aura Beanhaven, who is potentially the world's most trigger-happy fire wielder. Yeah, great. Anyway, it's all quite creepy. Aura's freaked out because she's beyond the wards, and I don't know if she's ever been beyond the wards, but she's not enjoying it. So she's like almost setting fire to everything, and Violet's like, you need to calm down. Put your gloves back on, you little fire-wielding weirdo. Mira goes into a house. Basically, it's kind of like an old museum, and she's in there looking for the gem. The reason that Mira goes in, I think, is because she's the best with lesser magic or something like that. Something rattles up ahead and I tilt my head, focusing in the direction. A glass bottle rolls down the gently sloped hill of a street, propelled by a gust of wind before lodging itself in a doorway 4 houses over. See? That's a glance over my shoulder, then whip my entire body around to face Aura. What the Just being prepared. She stands with her hands raised, a flint strike device between thumb and forefinger, fear pinching her face. That is an unhealthy, mission-dangerous amount of fear. Put them down. Away. Gloves on. You need to remind yourself that wielding is the worst possible thing we can do. No. Getting drained is far worse. I'm not about to be caught off guard. In fact, you should stand ready to. Absolutely not. My orders are not to wield unless there's an imminent threat of death, and I hardly think a bottle constitutes as such. As your senior wing leader, I'm ordering you to stand ready, Aura seethes. What use to you is our greatest weapon if you can't wield at a moment's notice? The only rank that matters out here is cadet. So with all due respect, fuck off. I kind of like bitchy Violet. It's a shame that she's only ever bitchy to Aura Beanhaven. At this point, Mira finds the gem. Yippee, we'll say. I blow out a sigh of relief. The door across the street swings open with an ear-screeching creak, and my head whips towards the sound, fear launching my heart into my throat as a figure steps out of the shadows. Vi, watch out. Aura's going to... Xaden starts. Don't! I pivot and throw myself at Aura, but the damage has been done. Fire sparks and spews from her hand like dragon flame and engulfs the doorway. Get off me! Aura bellows, shoving me aside as the figure stumbles forward into the moonlight and screams. I gasp, and for a millisecond... fear wins. Captain Grady is on fire. Yeah, that's right. Aura Beanhaven has just point blank executed Captain Gravy. R.I.P. man, we barely knew you. Unfortunately for everyone else involved, Professor Grady was not the only thing that Aura Beanhaven roasted, because very quickly the building Grady was in sets fire. And remember when I said that they're basically in a tinderbox? Fire starts spreading. Yes, that's right. The gang now have to outrun an active wildfire. You see what I mean about how just like things keep happening? And I'm like, okay. The gang are racing towards the town square because it's the only space that has enough space for the dragons to land so that they can get the hell out of Dodge. Mira's dragon arrives first, so she's up and out of there. Then it's Aura's turn. She's freaking out because she just murked Professor Grady, and Violet is like, hey, in the words of Troy Bolton, get your head in the game. Unfortunately for them, Big Fire has now attracted Wyvern. Yeah. So now they're out running a wildfire and Wyvern. Henson is like, Aura, run. Your dragon's here. So she runs out at Henson's command and very quickly gets speared through the torso by a Wyvern claw. Yep, that's great. Aura Beanhaven's dead. And Violet is not taking it well. Tell you who is taking it well. Bloody Lieutenant Henson, who genuinely doesn't seem to give a shit. Bro just goes, damn, they got here quick. And then tries to make Xaden run out. This is sus behaviour. What is going on? Xaden naturally is like, absolutely not. I don't take orders from random people I don't know. Especially not people who just got Aura Beanhaven murked. So Gale eats one of the Wyvern, but bad news is, Wyvern hunt in pairs. So Argyle Violence is like, Terran, you're gonna need to take both me and Xaden immediately, like right now. To which Terran says, I am not a horse. Right, true. But is now really the time, Terran? Xaden pulls a hold on tight spider monkey move and wraps Violet around the front of him like a little backpack and secures her with his shadows. And Terran kind of claws them up, so they're just hanging there. Right? Violet is a front-facing backpack like she's on a Japanese train. The Wyvern starts chasing them and Violet's like, well, this isn't good. Xaden's like, well, can you do the whole lightning from the sky thing? Violet's a bit like, oh, I'm a bit worried about wielding when Xaden's so close. To which Terran is like, babe, I'm pretty sure he's been closer than this when you've wielded lightning before, dare I say. Violet hits him with a, I will not dignify that, with a response. And she then strikes the venom with her lightning. Bullseye, she's hit it, it's dead. Very good. It then cuts to them getting back within the wards and Lieutenant Pugh seems to think that they just let Grady die. Bear in mind, they didn't. They do desperately try to put the flames out. Like, Xaden puts his shadows on him and everything. But, like, that man is melted. He is a marshmallow that's been over the fire pit too long. But the fire pit was Aura Beanhaven. It is literally 4:48 in the morning. I don't know what we're doing anymore. Xaden is having none of it. He pins Lieutenant Pugh against a wall and is like, so where were you then, babe? You're all talk. Where were you when Grady died and the Wyvern attacked us? And he says he was, quote, patrolling north. Yeah, loser excuse. Shut up. Mira, Violet and Xaden then basically group together and Mira reveals that she managed to grab the gemstone before the whole place went up in smoke. But unfortunately, the gemstone is now cracked and not really citrine in colour anymore. It's kind of like a smoky black. But I'll be honest, if Violet got out of being executed because the Court of Orisha wasn't specific enough, I reckon they can still bring the broken citrine because bro didn't ask for it in mint condition, did he? He just said, bring the citrine. I think you're fine, babe. Crack on. Okay, so back at No Longer a Death Factory, Basgiath, Violet has now read her dad's book 3 times, and she believes that she has some idea of what he's found out, but she hasn't told anyone, including the readers. Yep. That's right, she's keeping secrets yet again. She's talking to a squad and Riddick wants to be added to the search team. He wants to go on to Quest Squad. Basically, he does this whole speech about how things always go wrong when Violet goes off on her own without anyone from their squad. Which, I mean, he's not technically wrong. He basically says because Sawyer's still in therapy and Rhiannon has a squad to lead, neither of them can go, so only he can go, which means he has to go to be Violet's protector. Everyone's like, yeah, absolutely not, bruv. And Riddick gets really defensive and mad, and he's basically like, just because I act like the funny guy doesn't mean I'm not as capable as the rest of you. Which, no one was saying you weren't, Diva. But like, it is hard to take you seriously when you say something and then go, oops, did I say that out loud? I'm not going to trust you on a secret death mission either, babe. Anyway, whilst he's getting angry, the orange that he's holding freezes from the inside out. And Violet's like, how on earth did you do that? And he basically says that he's been practicing his Signet because he wants to get stronger like everyone else. And he's worked out that he can freeze the water inside fruit, and he believes he can do the same to water inside of a human being. I genuinely think that might be the most frightening Signet we've seen so far. I wonder how many other people can do that. And he's like, basically none of them. Apparently it's really rare for ice wielders to even be able to pull water out of the air, let alone within a human body, which could mean nothing. How rare and powerful this Signet is, it seems. It's almost kind of like how Violet has a really rare and powerful Signet, and also Xaden has a really rare and powerful Signet. I wonder if now would be a really good time to see what Signets the first 6 riders had. No? Okay. Anyway, upon hearing this, Violet's like, you're absolutely right, Riddick, and also you can freeze human beings from the inside out. You're absolutely coming with me on Quest Squad. Violet goes into the scenario with her preferred squad, which now includes Riddick, and also includes Catriona, and someone that Catriona brought with her, who turns out is her cousin, who is a flyer called Drake, who was mentioned in Iron Flame. Violet goes to the scenarium, and they lay out all of their plans for her trip to Deverelli, and for all of the stuff moving forward, which includes the fact that they want to search Orisha for information to do with the Irids. Basically, they just want an excuse to raid Xaden's outpost and steal all the information, basically. Sorry I'm late, Mira says, bypassing Kat and her cousin to stand at my right. Hell of a headwind out of the north. What did I miss? I think Violet's about to lose her shit, Riddick whispers. This, I toss the halves of the scroll at Halden and he catches them with the same reflexes that make him lethal on the battlefield, is not the plan, and they, I gesture to the seated riders, are not my squad. Searching Orisha is the first logical course of action, considering it is the only area we have no information on. Markham starts, his cheeks leaning toward Ruddy. You don't speak, I snap, meeting his gaze for the first time in months. Not to me. As far as I'm concerned, you have the credibility of a drunkard and the integrity of a rat. You dare complain about missing 6 years of information on Orisha when you've hidden centuries of our continent's history? Halden's brows rise and Mira shifts her hand to the pommel of her sword. You cannot speak to a superior officer, let alone the commander of a quadrant, with such disrespect! Markham roars, coming out of his chair. In case you missed it when I crossed the parapet, I am not in your chain of command. But you are in mine, Atos warns. And I speak with the authority of Melgrin. And I speak with the authority of Tern and Darna and the Empyrean. Or did you forget that 2 dragons also lost their riders? If I wasn't in love with you already, I would be now, Xaden says, crossing his ankles. Sit, Markham, Halden orders. You tried and failed. We'll give this one shot, Sorengale. Name your squad for the Deverelli mission. But know that if you fail, we'll assign another commander, and refusing to continue will negate the terms of the Second Orisha Accord. The one that gave Xaden back his title. I swallow the lump in my throat. No pressure or anything. Accepted. For the Deverelli mission, my squad will consist of Lieutenant Ryerson, Lieutenant Sorengale, Cadet Gamlin, Cadet Cordella. I glance over my shoulder to get his rank. Captain Cordella, Cadet Atos, Prince Halden, and whatever favorite guard follows you in case you stub your toe, I say to Halden. When we succeed, I reserve the right to switch out members after the first expedition. It is giving girl boss, and I am actually quite grateful for it. She also mentions that she needs Xaden because Tyrandor were the last provenance to cut contact with the Isles essentially ago, which means he's low-key like the perfect person to reopen the communications. This bit of information is new to Xaden. I don't know if it's new to Big Government because they were the ones who probably censored it in the first place. Violet's like, yeah, you are allowed to read my father's book whenever you want, babe. Get that knowledge, king. During this whole conversation, we do find out that Xaden has been proposed to like 12 times since getting his title back. Yeah, he's hot shit now, but he doesn't want these brokies, okay? They're noble groupies. They just want his title, and he only has eyes for Violet Sorengale. Basically, all the terms are agreed, and as everyone is walking out of the mission, Mira Sorengale sees Drake, Kat's cousin, and she goes, Drake Cordella? Mira shouts, and the 3 of us turn as she charges across the room toward Drake. As in the Nightwing drift. He gives my sister a charming yet cocky smile. You've heard of me. You were instrumental in bringing the wards down in the Monstrate offensive last year. Her eyes narrow. I was. His grin expands. She knees him straight in the groin. Ooh! Riddick winces. He's going down. You must be Mira Sorringale, Drake manages to say, pain etched in every line of his face. Guess you've heard of me, too. She crouches down to his level. If you ever endanger my sister's life again, my blade will replace my knee. Got it? Heard. Excellent. Yeah, hello enemies to lovers trope. Am I right? Am I right? Not gonna lie, I did kind of see this budding romance between Mira and Drake coming from the minute the Catriona's sister said in Iron Flame that Mira was exactly Drake's type. But she's a writer, so obviously no can do. Right. Yeah, Mira being the Griffin side of the Fable Baron story is looking more likely now we consider that this is her love interest. She pats him on the shoulder and stands, dismissing Kat with a glare before turning my way. You get one chance to form your own squad, and you choose your ex, your current lover, the Quadrant's resident smartass, 2 people who have tried to kill you in the past year, 1 over said current lover, and whatever Dane is. These are your choices for the most important mission any writer could possibly undertake, and you... It's not my finest comeback. Okay, so now we get to the start of the 3rd side quest. There are more after this, I assure you. That whole aforementioned squad then fly to Corden, but the Griffins are struggling to keep up with the Flyers on account of the fact that they have to carry Holden and his guard in a basket. Yeah, the Griffins are just carrying these humans in a basket because the dragons refuse to, which, you know what? I'm back on Team Dragon, absolutely. Viscount Tyrannosaurus Rex comes out at this point and he's greeting them and he's like, hey, you're all probably gonna have to share rooms. Sorry about that, I've got a mansion, but it's not that big. And Violet is really struggling during this whole exchange because her body is just not doing well because they've been flying for a really long time. She is genuinely pretty much passing out from exhaustion at this point. And Xaden then starts supporting her using his shadows by merging the shadows into the black of her uniform so no one can tell. But he's basically holding up her body and taking some of the weight, which I'm not gonna lie, as a chronically ill girly, like I literally have knee braces on right now. I really liked this. Like I am still frustrated that her disability is not canonically mentioned as a disability and that you have to read out of the text to learn that Violet has an actual disability as opposed to it being on page. But this was genuinely one of the nicest kind of like partners supporting a disabled partner in a fantasy context that I could have imagined. This is great. I really loved this. Anyway, after Halden confirms that Xaden is on the mission in his capacity as a duke and not as a professor, he then lifts Violet up and carries her to his room. Yeah, making her weakness look like he's just horny. It's so cute. He then just puts Violet to bed and she passes out. Later on, Takaris basically tells them that they can't go to the Isles with Prince Halden in a basket because it's just not a good look, which is a shame because I do think the visuals of that are very funny. So he said he's going to take Holden to the Isles by boat, which is the way he usually travels, and the rest of them can just meet them there, which is fine. Viscount Thesaurus then warns them against making any deals with King Courtland when they meet, and to not give him any details of what Violet can do, because much like the Viscount himself, it sounds like Courtland is a little bit human traffickery. They travel out the next day, and 24 hours later, as they are flying over the sea, the magic begins to fade. Basically, the dragons start to like dip because they're losing a lot of their power. And within a very short amount of time, the riders lose their signets and the dragons can no longer speak to each other. And it's at that point that Violet realizes that she can no longer speak to Xaden through their bond either. Good news, they very quickly land at Takaris' manor house, and it is noted that the Isle is protected by some of the largest crossbolts that Violet has ever seen, which she calls dragon killers, which is not at all frightening. At all, no. Violet very quickly learns at this point that she is the only one who can still communicate mentally with her dragons. Literally no one else can talk to their dragons. Dragons can't talk to each other. It is very much given chosen one. We also find out at this point that Mira has brought a bunch of runes with them to the Isles to test if they work. She's just gonna run a bunch of different rune tests, I guess, whilst they're out there. During this whole part, Xaden seems visibly relaxed, and we quickly find out that because there's no magic, there's no temptation for him to draw from the earth. So for the first time since he's turned Big V, he actually seems happy. Violet then begins to consider Viscount Dracarys' offer to join him, that he gave her an Iron Flame, because she's thinking in her head, like, me and Xaden can just live out here in the Isles, have a good time. He doesn't want to drain the earth of its energy, and I can, like, garden or something. Who knows? The next day, everyone goes into Deverelli to try and hunt down the merchant that Violet's dad told her to talk to. They all ride into the market on horses, by the way, which Riddick calls a ridiculous way to travel. During this whole little travel arc, Xaden is almost a nice person to everyone on Quest Squad, which is freaking everyone out, especially Dane. He starts asking Dane about his childhood growing up with Violet, and Dane's like, I feel like this is a trick question and you're gonna stab me if I say anything. Xaden, he's still got those two swords strapped to his back. Xaden stops by a fabric shop to ask the owner if he knows someone called Narelle, and Violet is like staring at the dresses and the fabric outside of the shop being like, wow, these are pretty, I like these. And whilst they're all sat there on their little horses waiting for Xaden, everyone's kind of giving them dirty looks and kind of calling them firebringers, which is not a good omen. Yeah, dragon riders, not so popular in Deverelli, it turns out. Xaden comes back and says he knows where Narelle is. Apparently, she owns a rare bookshop that's down the road. So they go and find the rare bookshop. Violet, Xaden, Mira, and Dane all go inside. And they're like, hey, so, where is Narelle here? To which, instead of going in the back and grabbing Narelle, the two people in the shop grab weapons, call them firebringers like it's a slur, and start attacking them. Yes, because, of course, Violet will never know peace. It's actually quite an embarrassing experience for the bookshop owners, because the riders very easily put them on their ass. Like, they genuinely just, like, it's one of those things where they kind of just, like, stuck a foot out and they fell over. Like, that's how hilariously bad at fighting these people are. And once the shop owners are on their asses, a really old lady appears. Turns out this is Narelle, and the two people who attacked the riders are her grandkids. Basically, Narelle immediately clocks Violet because of silver hair, of course. And she's like, oh, you're here for the books that your dad left you. Books, you say? And if you're surprised by that, I really don't know why, because every time Violet gets something in this series, it's a book. It is always a book. It's like socks at Christmas, except for Violet Sorrengail, it's always Christmas and it's always books. Turns out Narelle is 93 years old, and she says, I am 93, or as you Amorales say, I have not yet met Malik. He is your god of death. Yes. To which Mira's like, is he not everyone's god of death? And Violet's like, nah, the Deverellis do not worship gods. But it is worth noting here that Narelle calls the riders Amorales, which is a term that Violet says she's never heard before, but then proceeds to ask no questions about this. None. Girl. Yes, my name is Violet. Knowledge is very important to me, Sorrengail. But my middle name is, unless it would speed up the progression of the plot too fast to fill out another 2 books. Anyway, yeah, no one ever mentions this Amorales thing again, so I guess we're just gonna have to wait until book 4. And I think this is us being told that the continent itself is split into lands of different god believers. And Navarre and Orisha and that lot, they all believe, most importantly, in Amari, which would make sense because Violet says during that pub conversation that Amari has the biggest temple, right? We following? Great. Like, there was, like, we couldn't have put some of this world building in the other 2 books? Really? We had to get it all now? Like, we had to have a whole book of plot hole filling and world building because we didn't do it earlier? At this point, our girl Nellie, who is Narelle, I've just called her Nellie, she mistakes Xaden as Dane because she basically realises that Violet and Xaden are together, and because Asher Sorrengail used to talk about how much he knew Dane and Violet would end up together, Nellie is just like, oh, so you must be Dane then.
I heard you saying you'd kill my grandson if he took another step toward your beloved, young man. How illogically, toxically romantic of you. Have to admit, that kind of confident violence isn't what I pictured when Asher talked about you, but the brown hair, those, I guess those are brown eyes, and how utterly smitten he predicted you would eventually be for each other. Well, he described you almost perfectly. Dane Atos.
Oh, kill me now. Mira snorts once, covers her mouth with her hand, then doubles over laughing. I'm sorry. She forces out and straightens, quickly masking her face and clearing her throat, but she slips again, her shoulders shaking. I just can't. I need a second. She walks behind the row of shelves, hopefully to compose herself. How would you like this to go? Dane asks me as Narelle glances among the three of us, her silver brows knitting. Just like it's gone for the last 3 months, Xaden answers, losing any and all trace of the niceties he showed Dane an hour ago. Everyone assumes she'll wind up with you, but it's my last name she ends up wearing on her flight jacket in formation. Seriously? Words absolutely fail me that he would go there. It was one time. Fine, twice if I count the return trip from Samara after we got back together. Glad you're feeling like yourself again. Dane leans against the counter. But we don't have last names on our flight jackets. And yet you get the fucking point. Xaden's jaw ticks. Narelle's gaze narrows on Xaden. You aren't Dane. Xaden shakes his head. I'm Dane. Dane raises his hand briefly. And he is? Xaden Ryerson. And he's mine, even when he's being a possessive ass.
Fen Ryerson's son. Asher certainly didn't predict that.
They then have a conversation where essentially they were all under the impression that because it was Deverelli and they value goods and trade and treasure, when Asher said bring your greatest treasure, they thought they had to bring like a material good, but Violet very quickly realizes that the greatest treasure she possesses was her brain. Yeah, that's why he said don't send another in your stead, Diva, because otherwise you ain't getting those books. Basically, Narelle tells us that Asher risked his life to hide all of his work with Narelle so that Violet could one day get it, but she's only allowed to get it if she can answer these 3 questions. The first is that she has to name the book that her father hid for her, which she already has read, so that was nice and easy. Done. 1 in the bag. The second question is she has to give her theory on why the Courtland rebellion failed, which is the content of the entirety of her father's book, which was that theory that she had from earlier that she didn't share with us because we were saving it for this moment. Also worth noting that in the chapters, in the little excerpts before chapters, in the lead up to this, you do get a bunch of snippets from the inside of her dad's book, so you can kind of work it out yourself. But she does just tell you here. Basically, after reading her dad's research on the topic, Violet believes that the second Courtland rebellion fails because Courtland made a deal with an Isle Kingdom that was brokered by Deverelli, that in exchange for aid from this isle, as in like soldiers to fight, Courtland in return give this Isle Kingdom dragons. Specifically, Feathertails. Public Notice 433.323 acknowledges a failed border breach attempt by Courtland forces near the outpost of Athabine on December 11th, 433 AU, 2 days before the Midnight Massacre. The only other record of that event exists in the journal of Colonel Hashbay, the commander of the outpost, who oversaw the interrogations. I look over at Dane. Dad drilled that into me while he was working on the manuscript, and I didn't understand why then, but obviously I get it now. Dad was pacing in front of the fire, and you thought it was ludicrous that the soldiers had crossed into Navarre to acquire tail feathers, remember? The interrogation was recorded in the common tongue. Dane's eyes widen, but the raiders spoke Crovelish, and descriptors follow nouns in Crovelish. They were hunting feathertails, dragons. I nod. I think Deverelli brokered a deal with Crovla and an unnamed isle that the isle would provide the army and Crovla would provide dragons. When they were unable to do so, the deal fell apart. The Midnight Massacre happened and Crovla remained a part of Paramil. The Midnight Massacre, by the way, is a point at which all of the Courtland rebels were slaughtered because Deverelli basically withdrew their brokerage because Crovla couldn't keep the deal and told Navarre where to find all the rebels. Anyway, the third question Nellie asks is why Violet left Heldon, and Violet basically admits that she caught him having sex with his professor, which everyone is gagged by the way, because turns out she didn't really tell anyone that this is why they broke up. And Dane's like, damn, you should have told me that. We find out shortly after this that question wasn't actually part of Asher's test requirements to get these books. Nellie's just a gossip and she wanted the tea, which is actually iconic. But anyway, thanks to Violet's massive brain, Nellie gives her 6 books from her dad, and each one of them is passcode locked with the same ward magic destroying vials. So yeah, naturally they will explode if she gets the password wrong. So we've just got the same thing we already had, but like 6 more times. Excellent. At this point, they go back to Viscount Tyrannosaurus Rex's summer house, and Violet's having a bath because her bones are very weary because she's been traveling a lot. Understandable. Xaden starts kissing her, and Violet realizes that big man is DTF because guess what? There's no magic here, diva. He does not need to hold back. Yeah, for making it through 200 pages, you get a nice little spicy reward. They're finally going to Pound Town. I do just want to say though, for some reason throughout this book, ever since Xaden turned Venin, he's like obsessed with Violet's skin being soft. Like at multiple points in this book, like any time when they touch, he says something along the lines of, "Gods, I love your skin. It's so soft." Or, "Your skin is so soft." And I'm not gonna lie, he's talking like he's gonna make furniture out of it. Which, you know, now he's turned Big V. It's a possibility. Anyway, they get freaky and break a table. Beautiful work. And if you're thinking, that sounds familiar, it is. They also broke a wardrobe in Fourth Wing. Yeah, no wood is safe while these two are around. Whilst they're having sex, Violet kind of notes that she's missing the being inside each other's heads parts of their intimacy, but it's enough for now because she's not been to Pound Town in a long time, and she used to be a permanent resident, you know, so she's happy just to visit. Afterward, Violet talks about how they could just stay on the Isle because, you know, life here is good and Xaden seems happy. But he insists that he can't because Sigale is in pain. Yeah, turns out all the dragons are in pain because there's no magic on the Isles. Violet asks Terran why he didn't tell her that he was in pain, and Terran's like, "Why would I tell you? You're in pain all the time, basically, and you don't feel the need to tell me. Chronic ill girlies unite, am I right?" We also find out Indara is the only dragon that isn't in pain, which could mean nothing, exactly. Xaden very explicitly states that he won't let Sigale be in pain, which, again, could mean nothing. And he also wouldn't let Violet sacrifice her whole life to stay on the Isles for him either. At this point, Violet and Xaden's post-coitus cuddles are interrupted by a bunch of people at the door. Now, side note, why are people always inside Xaden and Violet's hallways post-coitus? Literally, it happens at least twice every single book. This is the second time it's happened this book. They interrupt and Xaden has to answer the door in a towel because he won't let Violet answer the door in a towel because Dane's out there and her dad wanted Dane and her to get married. And I'm not gonna lie, I kind of live for petty jealous Xaden. Like, that's funny. He opens the door and it turns out the whole of Quest Squad are in the hallway. Why, you might ask? Well, turns out King Courtland has decided to keep Haldon. What is it with this book and human trafficking? And Xaden literally just replies, "Too bad for Haldon." Sir, can we please be serious for one single moment, please? The Crown Prince of your country have just been kidnapped and you're like, "I'm busy going to Pound Town with my girl right now." Basically, because Xaden is the only aristocrat on the team, he has to be the one to go and see the king to get Haldon back. And he's like, fine, but I'm taking Violet with me. So naturally, they go to see King Courtland and all of his guards have got a blue sash on. And they say that they're not allowed in. But Xaden is like, "You will see me because I am the Duke of Tyrendor and this is my consort." Pointing to Violet, which could mean nothing. And Violet's like, "Hey babe, I'm not actually your wife, by the way." Xaden basically just replies like, "Haha, but like, when would you like to be my wife though?" And Violet's like, maybe when we're not on the brink of like imminent death, babe. I think that would be a perfect time. Also, side note, the colours of things in this book have become like kind of important. So the fact that Courtland's guards have blue on, you will need to kind of remember this for later. Anyway, they go in, they see King Courtland, Haldon and Takaris all sitting together. They're at like a big table spread. They've each got like meals in front of them. And I guess Haldon is just kind of like, he's not allowed to move. Violet and Xaden are like, "Hey, so what did Haldon do?" Because we know that Haldon is the reason for this, because it's Haldon. And King Courtland basically says that Haldon tried to make a deal by asking to use Takaris' manor house as a base while they search the other isles in exchange for the gemstone that he wanted. However, because the citrine is busted, King Courtland's like, that is not good enough, babe. And then Halden offered King Courtland something that, quote, wasn't his to give. And at this point, Courtland stabs Halden in the hand. Yeah. Right. Halden is just getting beat left, right, and centre, and not at all in the way he wants. Apparently, what Halden tried to give was the dagger that Courtland has just put through his hand, which is, as it turns out, Xaden's. Yeah, it's the blade of Orisha, which is identifiable because it has like an emerald hilt. If you remember, Xaden also has like a sword of Orisha or of Tyrandor or something similar, and that also has emeralds in. So green, Orisha, I guess. At this point, King Courtland introduces 3 white panthers. Yeah, I know. Bear with me. And these panthers are called Shira, Sheena, and Shora. That's right. They are this world's Kardashians, apparently. The Shardashians, if you will. Courtland is like, oh, I guess you want the same deal that Halden wanted, and I'll give it to you if you're honest with me. And Zane's like, okay, maybe. What do you want to know? And Courtland's like, who are you loyal to? Navarre or Tyrandor? And if you lie, there will be no deal. And like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't know how he's gonna know if he lies. Is there a truth sayer present, I guess? But Xaden, Duke of Tyrandor, by the way, says with his chest, my loyalty is to Violet above anything, and then it would be Tyrandor, then Navarre. Violet then asks if the Venin have ever been to the Isles, because she's, again, still on her, I'm trying to find a cure. Maybe the king knows something art. And Courtland really doesn't like this. He gets very mad and he's like, listen here, bitch. Shut your mouth. How dare you imply that my isle is as crusty, dusty and weak as your little continent? He basically says that conquerable isles are unstable and people don't invest in unstable isles, so shut your mouth. Yeah, that's right, he's a capitalist. Boo, everyone, boo! Get him out of here! At this point, Courtland starts flexing his panthers again, the Shardashians, and he's like, it's mealtime, bone apple teeth. And they put up these platters of giant meat across this table, and they're just like wolfing it down, which is great. One of them right next to Violet, she's like, oh, I don't like this. And then at this point, one more plate is placed in front of King Courtland. And he grabs the lid and he yanks it off. And what's on the plate? Yeah, it's Anna Wilshire's head. That's right. The panthers are eating Halden's red-headed guard. Yeah, and the big slab of meat, that's just her torso. It's getting wild. Things are getting out of control. Courtland has killed Anna Wilshire because she was trying to steal items from his treasury on Halden's orders. Like, she deadass had a list. She was going grocery shopping in this man's vault. Halden basically argues that the items belong to Halden's kingdom, but have been given to Deverelli over the last 100 years. And he claims they're ours and it's not stealing to take them back. Which, listen, I don't like the man. And, like, I don't love that he's done this right now. But if you just imagine that Courtland is like the British Museum and Halden is every other nation on Earth trying to retrieve their artifacts by any means necessary, it kind of makes sense. Like, I'm a little bit on board. Anyway, at this point, Xaden whispers to Violet, like, hey, so what's the punishment for theft? In Deverelli? And Violet, the walking encyclopedia, except for anything that would help the plot, Sorringale, is like, it is death, unfortunately. But their laws can overlap and contradict each other. But also, Courtland would be the one sitting on Halden's tribunal. So it really could swing either way. Anyway, Violet basically realised that Halden has screwed them over. Xaden then asks Courtland, like, hey, can you make a deal with me and Tyrandor instead of Halden and Crusty Navarre? And in return, I'll give you the sword of Tyrandor. Or Orisha, I don't know. Anyway, either way, he's packed that in his backpack the whole time. Good thing, good, very convenient thing that he did that. Violet's like, absolutely not, sir. You're not giving away your family heirloom. You've given up too much. Like, I'm going to sort this. And whilst they're just yapping amongst themselves, Courtland just gets bored of it and honestly just orders them all to be murdered. And I'm going to be real with you. Fair enough. Actually, he doesn't order all of them to be murdered. He does say, leave Viscount Tyrannosaurus Rex. So I guess human trafficker recognized human trafficker. All the guards start attacking them. Xaden throws Holden a sword so that they can fight the guards together, even though Holden is with blade in hand. And not like in hand to use it. No, the blade is literally piercing through his hand. Xaden then very quickly says, don't kill anyone because it'll ruin our chances of getting a deal. And we need one. So just like disarm them. However, whilst they're fighting against the guards, one of them smashes Violet's conduit and then basically hits her and splits the skin on her cheek. The minute Xaden sees that, he's got murder on the mind. He vows to kill everyone. And then he does. Except he doesn't use the sword in his hand. No. Xaden Ryerson uses shadows. But you might be thinking, but there's no magic in Deverelli, so how's he using his signet? Ruh-roh, he's gone full evil Knievel. Yeah, he's done a Jack Bloody Barlow and he's drained the alloy in Violet's conduit. Xaden, no! Violet then has to desperately beg Andarna and Terran for help because they have to get Xaden the hell out of here before everyone realizes he's got red bloody eyes. So Terran gets Sigale, and Sigale, Terran and Andarna all are just hiding behind some trees. And Terran's like, it's getting pretty crowded back here, babe. I don't know. But Violet then has got a plan and she tells Andarna to do something, right? Andarna rocks up with Shira, one of the Shardashian Panthers, in her mouth. And then Violet then uses this as a bargaining tool to get Courtland to agree to negotiate new terms for a deal with her and Navarre. Courtland's like, no, my baby Shardashian. Yes, sure, fine, whatever. She apologizes on behalf of Xaden and then immediately sends Xaden back to Orisha. Because obviously he can no longer stay here because Homeboy now has red rims on his eyes. You've only got to ruined everything, Xaden. Once Zaddy's got the hell out of Dodge on Sigale, Violet rolls her shoulders and she's in like full-on I'm a noble diplomat mode, right? So she's like, listen here, Diva. Courtland, my king, my guy. I will give you the citrine that you wanted, the little gemstone, and I will also give you the most valuable thing we can give you. And then she busts out the satchel that she was going to give to Nellie earlier, before when she thought that they had to bring a great rare treasure. But it turns out she was the great rare treasure. She pulls out this satchel, and inside the satchel, she reveals a dragon egg. To which Courtland is like, babe, listen, you've seen one egg, you've seen them all. I've seen a dragon egg a bajillion times, I don't need another one. Violet's like, nah, you've not seen this dragon egg before. This is a special dragon egg. And why is that, you ask? Maybe because Violet is presenting him with Andarna's dragon egg, which is the only Irid dragon egg, basically, that anyone's seen in like 600 years. Courtland, being a greedy little capitalist, is like, oh my god, think of the shareholder value. And so he's like, absolutely fine. You can use Deverelli as a base for all your Isle adventures on one condition. And Violet's like, what is it? He's like, Holden can never come back to Deverelli. And Violet immediately is like, absolutely, yes, done. At this point, Courtland says that they know that they're going to search Umbriel first, because I think it's the closest. And he says on account of that, he might have another trade that Violet would be interested in. And if you want to know what that trade is, you'll have to wait, because their third side quest, much like this video, ends here. Yeah, sorry, this is the end of part 1. See you in a bit.